Chapter 495. But no matter how he thought about it, Emperor Hashan couldn't understand. Why was there 70 million dragon power points? In front of the number that he was so proud of, there were actually 3 existences that were stronger than him. Those 390 million dragon power points were placed above Emperor Hashan's. How ironic and how dazzling it was. Thinking back to the Emperor's compliments just now, Emperor Hashan suddenly felt ridiculed, as if countless invisible slaps had hit his face. At this moment, Emperor Hashan felt that he had no face to stay here any longer, because he could feel that the emperors were laughing at him in their hearts at this moment. And the opponent that he had defeated was probably laughing at him at this moment as well. Emperor Hashan, The emperors saw that Emperor Hashan didn't say anything. This awkward atmosphere was really uncomfortable. The emperors looked at Emperor Hashan and said carefully. Emperor Hashan's expression changed. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he said with a smile, "Like I said, there are many strong countries in the world of 10,000 nations. My 70 million dragon power points are nothing." Although Emperor Hashan pretended to not care, anyone could see that Emperor Hashan was forcing a smile, and his tone was full of displeasure. This actually stumped the emperors because at this moment, they didn't know how to respond to Emperor Hashan's words. "Everyone, get ready. I will definitely lead you to victory in the next round," Emperor Hashan said in a deep voice. "Thank you very much, Emperor Hashan. Then I will take my leave and not disturb Emperor Hashan. I also have something to do. I will also take my leave. I suddenly remembered that I still have something to deal with. Emperor Hashan, let's meet again in the next round." The emperors spoke one after another. After they finished speaking, they immediately turned and left without waiting for Emperor Hashan's response. Emperor Hashan's expression became even gloomier. He didn't expect the emperors to be so realistic. "Your Majesty, these damned fence-sitters, what should we do next?" A guard beside Emperor Hashan asked. "Don't worry, they will regret it. Soon, they will pay the price for what they did today." Emperor Hashan's eyes flashed with murderous intent. If he guessed correctly, the emperors were afraid of the 3 dynasties. After all, anyone who saw 3 empires with 90 million dragon power points would be terrified. Even he himself was no exception. That was because when he first saw this number, he was also extremely shocked. He thought that his 70 million dragon power points would be enough to get first place. Then, he would proceed to the next round, obtain victory, and become an emperor-level organization. This was all part of his plan. All of this seemed to have happened naturally. However, he never expected that a powerful enemy would appear out of nowhere. No, there were 3 powerful enemies. No matter how he looked at it, 3 people with 90 million dragon points gave him a lot of pressure. However, he couldn't accept it. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't accept that he was defeated just like that. It wasn't easy for him to have the chance to become famous. He couldn't let it be ruined just like that. Fire Dynasty, Sun Dynasty, and Chun Dynasty, I won't let you off so easily. Emperor Hashan narrowed his eyes. How could he have 70 million dragon power points if he didn't have a real background? Go and contact Emperor 1, Emperor Ta, and Emperor Zhou. Emperor Hashan ordered his guard. The 3 emperors he was referring to were the emperors of the dynasties. Each of them had a few hundred million dragon power points. These martial monarchs were also his backers. "Forget it, I'll go personally," Emperor Hashan said worriedly. It wouldn't be easy to get the help of the 3 emperors. However, there were still 3 months. He could persuade the 3 emperors now. Even if the 3 emperors didn't help, he would at least give up. In Emperor Wen's court, Emperor Wen was sitting on the dragon throne with a displeased expression. However, none of the officials dared to speak. After all, Emperor Wen was very powerful. In Emperor Wen's court, his words were absolute. Hashan greets Emperor Wen. "May Emperor Wen live a long life." Emperor Hashan bowed respectfully. "Emperor Hashan, why are you looking for me?" Emperor Wen asked in a slightly stern tone. "Emperor Wen, I'm here for the all-country grand ceremony. How dare you? Are you here to laugh at me?" Before Emperor Hashan could finish his sentence, Emperor Wen interrupted him. He looked even more displeased. That was because the One dynasty had lost the All-Kingdom Grand Ceremony. They had lost 50 million points of dragon power. Although the loss of dragon power wasn't enough to lower his rank, it was still fatal to Emperor One. It had greatly reduced Emperor One's power. Emperor One, you misunderstood. How could I be so ungrateful? Emperor Hashan immediately smiled. Oh, what do you mean? Emperor One's frown eased slightly as he continued to ask. Emperor One, you might not know this, but Emperor Hashan managed to obtain 70 million dragon power points thanks to you, Emperor Hashan said. I've heard. Emperor One nodded and said, if you win the next round, you'll be on equal footing with me. Emperor One, you must be joking. Even if you gave me 10,000 guts, I wouldn't dare to be on equal footing with you. And I definitely wouldn't show off in front of Emperor One. Emperor Hashan hurriedly wiped off his cold sweat. Oh, Emperor One frowned slightly and asked curiously, then what do you mean? Emperor One, it's like this. Emperor Hashan immediately explained the matter of the three empires, suppressing him perfectly. I see, but this is Emperor Hashan's matter. What does it have to do with me? Emperor One laughed contemptuously. I want to ask Emperor One for help. Emperor Hashan braced himself and said what was on his mind. Huh? Emperor One looked at Emperor Hashan quietly and suddenly began to laugh loudly. Help you? Then tell me, who should I ask for help now that I, Emperor One, have lost? Now that he had lost 50 million dragon power points, Emperor One was already in a bad mood. How could he help Emperor Hashan so easily? Emperor Hashan also knew that Emperor One wouldn't help him so easily. On the other hand, if Emperor One were to help him so easily, then there would be a real problem. Sir, come with me. Emperor Hashan immediately took out a map. Emperor Hashan immediately opened the map. On the map, there were some red and blue marks. Emperor One, please take a look. This is Emperor Wen's empire. Emperor Hashan pointed at a blue dot on the map and said. Emperor Hashan then pointed at 3 red dots on the map and said, and these are the 3 empires. If they unite, they will definitely become a threat to Emperor One. Seeing that the Fire Empire, Sun Empire, and Shin Empire were very close to each other on the map, Emperor One frowned deeply. Because it was just as Hashan said. If the 3 empires united and became an imperial empire, it would definitely have a huge impact on him. However, although he thought this way, it didn't mean that Emperor One would be so easily manipulated. Chapter 496. As far as I know, these 3 countries are all controlled by a country called the Fire Dragon Empire. Emperor Hashan said slowly. Fire Dragon Empire? Why does this name sound so familiar? I think I've heard of it somewhere before. Emperor One couldn't help but ponder when he heard this name. Your Majesty, do you still remember the small country that shocked the dukedom rankings some time ago? Seeing that His Majesty was confused, a minister immediately stood up and said, So, what's that country? Hearing the minister's words, Emperor One instantly recalled it. Because of this, he had said a few words to the minister back then. However, because the Fire Dragon Empire was just a dukedom back then, he quickly forgot about it. It was like an adult who wouldn't take the mosquito seriously when there was a noisy mosquito in front of him. That's right, Emperor One. It's that country. Emperor Hashan immediately said, But this is too unbelievable. Are you sure you're telling the truth? Now that he knew which country the Fire Dragon Empire was. However, Emperor One immediately became even more suspicious. After all, it was already unbelievable that a mere dukedom could control 3 empires. Moreover, it controlled 3 of the top 3 empires on the dukedom rankings. How could he believe this? One had to know that when Emperor Wen's dynasty was promoted, he didn't even have so much dragon power after the first round. He had to rely on a lot of luck to be promoted to an emperor-level empire. After many years of hard work, he managed to preserve the dragon power and promote to a 3rd-grade empire. However, he didn't expect that the first round of the Myriad Kingdom ceremony would cause him to lose more than 5,000 dragon power and be demoted to a 2nd-grade empire. If he really allowed these 3 empires to continue the competition, they would definitely win the competition. If the three empires were to unite, it would definitely affect him. If Emperor Wen doesn't believe me, you can send someone to investigate. Hearing Emperor Hashan's words, Emperor Wen pondered for a moment. He knew that this was no small matter and immediately signaled one of his trusted ministers with his eyes. The minister immediately nodded and left the hall. Come, Emperor Hashan, let's not talk about this for now. Prepare the banquet. Then I'll do as you say. Emperor Hashan smiled. He could guess what Emperor Wen's ministers were doing. Moreover, he had enough time. He had enough time for Emperor Wen to investigate. He stole a glance at Emperor Wen. Although he pretended not to care, he couldn't hide the seriousness in his eyes. Emperor Hashan laughed inwardly. He believed that Emperor Wen would definitely help him. Ahem, Emperor Hashan, please wait for a moment. I'll go down and change my clothes. Emperor Wen said apologetically as the wine glass in his hand accidentally fell onto his clothes. Emperor Wen, please go and change your clothes. Don't worry about me. Emperor Hashan immediately stood up and said with an indifferent expression. Looking at Emperor Wen's back, Hashan revealed a smile. If he guessed correctly, Emperor Wen's men had already returned. Next, it was time to announce the results. At this crucial moment, Emperor Hashan didn't frown at all. This was because he understood Emperor Wen's cautious personality. He definitely couldn't tolerate an old tiger cub growing up in front of him. Therefore, Emperor Wen would definitely take action. Greetings, Your Majesty. Emperor Wen's confident minister immediately bowed when he saw Emperor Wen. Forget it. What's the situation? Emperor Wen waved his hand and asked anxiously. Your Majesty, I wasn't able to find out if the three empires were controlled by the Fire Dragon Empire. What? Emperor Wen frowned and revealed an unhappy expression. Seeing Emperor Wen's unhappy expression, the minister immediately added in a panic, but they are indeed related. The minister immediately described the war between the Fire Dragon Empire and the Small Heaven Alliance. Could it be that Hashan was telling the truth? Emperor Wen pondered for a moment and said, Forgive me for my incompetence. I didn't have enough time to find out. The minister hurriedly apologized. Emperor Wen didn't blame the minister. This was because he knew that it wasn't easy for the minister to find out so much in such a short period of time. Now, what made him feel conflicted was whether he should take action or not. He should take advantage of the fact that the three empires had yet to mature and nip them in the bud. However, he had a feeling that he was being used as a tool by Emperor Hashan. This made him very uncomfortable. My dear minister, what do you think about this matter? Emperor Wen suddenly raised his head and looked at the minister. The minister glanced at the frowning Emperor Wen and immediately understood what Emperor Wen was thinking. He immediately bowed and cupped his fists. According to the current situation, Emperor Hashan might be telling the truth. If that's the case, we definitely can't let the three empires grow. Otherwise, they will become a threat to us. The minister looked at Emperor Wen cautiously and spoke cautiously. You mean to help Hashan deal with the three empires and the Fire Dragon Empire? Emperor Wen's eyes lit up as he asked. That's exactly what I mean. The minister gritted his teeth and said. At this moment, he was betting that Emperor Wen was thinking the same thing. If that was the case, everything would be fine. Emperor Wen thought about it for a long time. In fact, he had already made up his mind. At this moment, he was just calculating the benefits in his heart. He was thinking that if he could help Emperor Hashan destroy one of the empires, he would be able to recover the 50 million points of dragon power that he had previously lost. All right, I'll agree to your suggestion. If there are any accidents, I'll hold you accountable. Emperor Wen was a sly old fox as he spoke in a dignified manner. From his point of view, he couldn't afford to lose his position in the slightest. At this moment, the minister felt bitter. It was obvious that Emperor Wen wanted to use him as a scapegoat. If something bad happened, Emperor Wen would probably be the first to push him out and make him the scapegoat. Of course, if everything went smoothly, there would be nothing left to say. Emperor Wen would reap all the benefits. The minister wondered if he had offended Emperor Wen in some way. That was why Emperor Wen treated him like this. Although the minister felt bitter, he didn't dare to disobey. Although he felt bitter, he still smiled and said, Thank you, Your Majesty, for accepting my suggestion. Let's go. Follow me in. Since he had already made up his mind, Emperor Wen was instantly in a good mood. He was also sincerely happy that he could earn some dragon power. Of course, the benefits wouldn't just be this little. After all, Emperor Hashan had asked him for help. How could there be no benefits at all? A sly smile appeared on Emperor Wen's face. Emperor Hashan, I can consider your request. However, I don't know what benefits I can get if I help you. After walking into the main hall, the civil and military officials instantly stood still. Chapter 497. Because as far as I know, these 3 countries are all controlled by a country called the Fire Dragon Empire. Emperor Hashan said slowly. Fire Dragon Empire? Why does this name sound so familiar? I think I've heard of it before. Emperor Wen pondered when he heard the name. Your Majesty, do you still remember the small country that shocked the dukedom rankings some time ago? Seeing that His Majesty was confused, a minister immediately stood up and said, So it's that country. Emperor Wen instantly recalled it. Because of this, he had even said a few words to the minister. However, because the Fire Dragon Empire was just a dukedom back then, he quickly forgot about it. It was like an adult who would not take a mosquito seriously, even though it was making a ruckus in front of him. That's right, Emperor Wen. It's that country. Emperor Hashan immediately said, But this is too unbelievable. Are you sure you're telling the truth? Now that he knew which country the Fire Dragon Empire was. However, Emperor Wen became even more suspicious. After all, it was already unbelievable that a mere dukedom could control 3 empires. Moreover, it controlled 3 of the top 3 empires on the dukedom rankings. How could he believe it? One had to know that when Emperor Wen's dynasty was promoted, he did not even have so much dragon power after the first round. He had relied on a lot of luck to be promoted to an emperor-level empire. After many years of hard work, he managed to preserve the dragon power and promote to a 3rd-grade empire. However, he did not expect that the first round of the All-Kingdom ceremony would cause him to lose more than 5,000 dragon power and be demoted to a 2nd-grade empire. If these 3 empires were allowed to continue the competition, they would definitely win the competition. If the 3 empires were to unite, it would definitely affect him. If Emperor Wen does not believe me, you can send someone to investigate. Hearing Emperor Hashan's words, Emperor Wen pondered for a moment. He knew that this was not a trivial matter and immediately signaled to one of his trusted ministers. The minister immediately nodded and left the hall. Come, Emperor Hashan. Let's not talk about this for now. Prepare the banquet. Then I'll do as you say. Emperor Hashan smiled. He could guess what Emperor Wen's ministers were doing. Moreover, he had enough time. He had enough time for Emperor Wen to investigate. He stole a glance at Emperor Wen. Although he pretended not to care, he couldn't hide the seriousness in his eyes. Emperor Hashan laughed inwardly. He believed that Emperor Wen would definitely help him. Ahem, Emperor Hashan, please wait for a moment. I'll go down and change my clothes. Emperor Wen said apologetically as the wine glass in his hand accidentally fell onto his clothes. Emperor Wen, please go and change your clothes. Don't worry about me. Emperor Hashan immediately stood up and said with a nonchalant expression. Looking at Emperor Wen's back, Hashan revealed a smile. If he guessed correctly, Emperor Wen's men had already returned. Next, it was time to announce the results. At this crucial moment, Emperor Hashan didn't frown at all. This was because he understood Emperor Wen's cautious personality. He definitely couldn't tolerate an old tiger cub growing up in front of him. Therefore, Emperor Wen would definitely take action. Greetings, Your Majesty. Emperor Wen's confident minister immediately bowed when he saw Emperor Wen. Forget it. What's the situation? Emperor Wen waved his hand and asked anxiously. Your Majesty, I wasn't able to find out if the 3 empires were controlled by the Fire Dragon Empire. What? Emperor Wen frowned and revealed an unhappy expression. Seeing Emperor Wen's unhappy expression, the minister immediately added in a panic. But they are indeed related. The minister immediately described the war between the Fire Dragon Empire and the Small Heaven Alliance. Could it be that Hashan was telling the truth? Emperor Wen pondered for a moment and said, Forgive me for my incompetence. I didn't have enough time to find out. The minister hurriedly apologized. Emperor Wen didn't blame the minister. This was because he knew that it wasn't easy for the minister to find out so much in such a short period of time. Now, what made him feel conflicted was whether he should take action or not. He should take advantage of the fact that the three empires had yet to mature and nip them in the bud. However, he had a feeling that he was being used as a tool by Emperor Hashan. This made him very uncomfortable. "My dear minister, what do you think about this matter?" Emperor Wen suddenly raised his head and looked at the minister. The minister glanced at the frowning Emperor Wen and immediately understood what Emperor Wen was thinking. He immediately bowed and cupped his fists. According to the current situation, Emperor Hashan might be telling the truth. If that's the case, we definitely can't let the three empires grow. Otherwise, they will become a threat to us. The minister looked at Emperor Wen cautiously and spoke cautiously. "You mean to help Hashan deal with the three empires and the Fire Dragon Empire?" Emperor Wen's eyes lit up as he asked. "That's exactly what I mean." The minister gritted his teeth and said. At this moment, he was betting that Emperor Wen was thinking the same thing. If that was the case, everything would be fine. Emperor Wen thought about it for a long time. In fact, he had already made up his mind. At this moment, he was just calculating the benefits in his heart. He was thinking that if he could help Emperor Hashan destroy one of the empires, he would be able to recover the 50 million points of dragon power that he had previously lost. "All right, I'll agree to your suggestion. If there are any accidents, I'll hold you accountable." Emperor Wen was a sly old fox as he spoke in a dignified manner. From his point of view, he couldn't afford to lose his position in the slightest. At this moment, the minister felt bitter. It was obvious that Emperor Wen wanted to use him as a scapegoat. If something bad happened, Emperor Wen would probably be the first to push him out and make him the scapegoat. Of course, if everything went smoothly, there wouldn't be much to say. Emperor Wen would reap all the benefits. The minister wondered if he had offended Emperor Wen in some way. That was why Emperor Wen treated him like this. Although the minister felt bitter, he didn't dare to disobey. Although he felt bitter, he still smiled and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty, for accepting my suggestion. Let's go. Follow me in." Since he had already made his decision, Emperor Wen was instantly in a good mood. He was sincerely happy that he could earn some dragon power. Of course, the benefits wouldn't just be this. After all, Emperor Hashan had asked him for help. How could there be no benefits at all? A sly smile appeared on Emperor Wen's face. "Emperor Hashan, I can consider your request. However, I don't know what benefits I can get if I help you." After walking into the main hall, the civil and military officials instantly stood still. Chapter 498. Seeing that Yanlong's camp had not agreed, Emperor Hashan's tone immediately became arrogant. Emperor Hashan believed that countless people must be talking about him at this moment. This made him, who had wanted to be in the limelight, feel much better. He no longer cared. Anyway, whether Yanlong's camp agreed or not, he would be the biggest winner in the end. At this moment, in the Violet Heaven Divine Kingdom, the Imperial Ant's face was filled with worry. At the same time, she was furious. "This reckless Hashan dynasty dares to oppose my son." The Imperial Ant snorted coldly. She had only found out that Yanlong's camp was Yi Hao's camp through investigation and conjecture. Yanlong's camp had been in the limelight. She was stunned at first, but then her heart was filled with joy. However, before she could be happy for long, something happened that filled her heart with anger. Emperor Hashan had dared to join forces with three empires to go against Yi Hao. With a single glance, it was obvious that Yi Hao had fallen into a dangerous situation. If nothing unexpected happened, everything that Yi Hao had done before would be for naught. According to her personality, she would not be melancholy here. She would kill her way to Emperor Hashan's empire and the other imperial empires. She would let them know the consequences of going against her son. However, the consequences were still very serious. This was because she still had some things to deal with. If she exposed Yi Hao's identity now, she did not have full confidence in protecting Yi Hao's safety. Therefore, she did not dare to take the risk unless it was absolutely necessary. "It's time for me to meet him," the Imperial Ant thought with a complicated expression. Then, She changed into a black robe and hid in the darkness. Imperial Ant walked in front of a huge prison. Looking at the ordinary-looking prison, she realized that it was filled with powerful array formations. Even a martial god expert had no hope of escaping if they were locked up here. Therefore, this was the forbidden area of the Zetian Divine Kingdom. It was used to imprison important people. Seeing the Imperial Ant's arrival, a team of martial god experts immediately flew out from the darkness. One of them pointed at the Imperial Ant cautiously. "Who are you? This is a forbidden area of the Divine Nation. How can you just barge in?" While they were talking, the Golden Armor team had already formed a killing formation and surrounded the Royal Ant. "It's me. I have something to do inside." The Imperial Ant deliberately lowered her voice. At the same time, she flashed a purple token in her hand. That person originally wanted to ask more, but when he saw the token in the Imperial Ant's hand, everyone's expression changed, and they all put away their weapons. Everyone immediately knelt down. "Greetings, Your Majesty. I don't want anyone to know that I've been here." The Imperial Ant's voice deepened, directly interrupting everyone's salute. Then, "Won't His Majesty report it?" One of the Golden Armored Squad suddenly raised his head and asked, "What do you think?" Imperial Ant's voice suddenly turned cold. Everyone suddenly felt that the atmosphere around them had changed. They couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. "I'll just go in for a while." Seeing everyone's worried faces, Imperial Ant didn't want to make things too difficult for them. "Yes, please." The captain of the Golden Armor team immediately opened the gate of the prison and respectfully made way for her. The Imperial Ant nodded her head in satisfaction and walked into the prison. Her every movement was filled with boundless grandeur. Phew! Seeing the Imperial Ant enter, the Golden Armored guards all let out a sigh of relief. "I heard that Imperial Ant is powerful, but I didn't expect her to be so powerful." The aura on her body almost made me unable to breathe. That's right, it scared me to death. Not to mention you guys, even I was the same. After the guards saw the Imperial Ant leave, they all began to discuss. The captain had not retracted his gaze and was also in a state of shock. But strange, why did Imperial Ant come back here? Could something have happened? The captain frowned and said worriedly, "You're saying that Imperial Ant went in, just as the guards were about to discuss." Suddenly, a voice came from behind the crowd. This voice sounded like a man's or a woman's. Even though they were martial gods, they still couldn't tell if this voice was male or female. Hearing the voice behind them, everyone's bodies suddenly trembled. Fear immediately filled their hearts. Although there was no change in the weather, they all felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Cold sweat kept pouring out of their foreheads. Fear, panic, helplessness, all sorts of emotions were mixed in their hearts. There was only one person in the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom whose voice they couldn't tell the gender of, and that was the Purple Sky Supreme God Emperor. "What's wrong? Are you mute?" Just as everyone was at a loss, the Purple Sky Supreme God Emperor's voice rang out again. Plop, plop, plop. The guards slowly turned around, but they didn't dare to look at the Purple Sky Supreme God Emperor. They all knelt on the ground. All the guards knelt on the ground. They had never thought that they would be so unlucky. They had actually bumped into the Imperial Ant and the Purple Sky Supreme God Emperor at the same time. The Purple Sky Supreme God Emperor was now divided into two factions. One faction was the Purple Sky Supreme God Emperor's faction, while the other was the Imperial Ant's faction. However, no matter which faction they belonged to, they were not people who they could afford to offend. Most importantly, the two factions hadn't fallen out with each other yet. As the guards of the Purple Sky Divine Kingdom, they had to listen to the Purple Sky Supreme God Emperor. The Purple Sky Supreme God Emperor had ordered that no one was allowed to enter the heavenly prison. The guards all understood that this anyone included the Imperial Ant. Now that they had let the Imperial Ant in and had been caught red-handed by the Purple Sky Supreme God Emperor, they were instantly dumbfounded. "Your Majesty, please spare our lives. We know our mistakes. Please punish us." The guard captain knew that he had no other choice but to beg the Purple Sky Supreme God Emperor to spare their lives. "Your Majesty, please punish us. Your Majesty, please punish us. Your Majesty, please. Seeing that even the captain was doing this, the guards all panicked and begged for mercy. Rumble. When he heard the heavenly prison's door open, Yi Batian didn't open his eyes. He thought that someone had come to deliver food. However, when he heard the footsteps, it was different from before. Yi Batian opened his eyes curiously and saw the imperial aunt in a black robe. However, he couldn't recognize her at first glance. Yi Batian didn't understand and couldn't help but frown. He asked in a deep voice, "Who are you, Batian? Are you white?" Suddenly, a strange yet familiar voice came from under the black robe. When he heard this voice, Yi Batian felt his body start to tremble. It's you." Yi Batian's heart was filled with excitement, disbelief, and all sorts of other emotions. His lips started to tremble as he spoke. Chapter 500. Your Majesty, please give us your orders. We will do anything for you. The guards didn't even dare to look at the purple sky supreme god. As they spoke, their bodies were still trembling. All of you, go to the Fire Dragon Empire. The purple sky supreme god ordered the golden battle armor squad. Fire Dragon Empire? Everyone frowned and looked confused. They had never heard of the Fire Dragon Empire before. Although they didn't understand, they didn't dare to interrupt the purple sky supreme god. Instead, they listened attentively to his orders. All of you, go to the Fire Dragon Empire. Don't be in a hurry to attack. Wait until the grand ceremony is over before you attack. The purple sky supreme god's eyes flashed with a sinister look. She wanted to give her aunt a double blow. She wanted her aunt to see Yanlong's faction being defeated and then destroyed in the real world. She believed that it would definitely be a fatal blow to her aunt. When she thought of this, she couldn't help but feel happy. Yes, everyone nodded. Even if the purple sky supreme god ordered them to die, they wouldn't dare to disobey. Do you know where His Majesty went? The Fire Emperor asked anxiously. I don't know either. His Majesty ordered us to gather resources, and then he disappeared. Guan Yu shook his head. How did this happen? His Majesty didn't say where he was going? The Fire Emperor asked again. One had to know that a month had passed, and Yi Hao had yet to appear. However, there were still 2 months before the second round of the tournament. He desperately wanted to know what Yi Hao's next step was. Furthermore, the He-Shan camp's provocations hadn't stopped since the beginning. This made him feel extremely sullen in his heart. I really don't know. I'm more anxious than you are. Guan Yu laughed bitterly. At the same time, he asked worriedly, Are you doing the gathering of resources? Don't worry. I wouldn't dare to be careless. The resources have already piled up in the mountains and are being transported here. The Fire Emperor shook his head. Forget it. I'll go down and gather more resources. The Fire Emperor couldn't understand why Yi Hao would suddenly disappear when the situation was so dire. Furthermore, shouldn't he be training his soldiers? Why would he be gathering resources? These resources could not be brought into the secret realm either. Seeing the Fire Emperor leave, Guan Yu shook his head as well. This was because within this month, not only did the Fire Emperor come to visit, even the people from the Sun Dynasty and Qin Dynasty came by several times. But a month ago, Yi Hao had only instructed him to gather resources. He hadn't told him anything else. Phew, all that's left is the divine primary grass. In a valley, Yi Hao could not help but let out a sigh of relief after plucking the last of the herbs. Yi Hao, are you done yet? We're bored to death. From afar, Guo Fu and Mu Qingyu's bored voices could be heard. It's done. Yi Hao clapped his hands and smiled. What kind of herbs are those that you've collected? You don't even care about the Myriad Kingdom ceremony anymore. Don't you think you're losing your mind because of your frivolity? Guo Fu asked Yi Hao. Who said I don't care about the Myriad Kingdom ceremony? I collected these herbs for the Myriad Kingdom ceremony. Hearing Yi Hao's words, the two girls couldn't help but twitch their lips. Obviously, they didn't believe that Yi Hao's collection of herbs had anything to do with the Myriad Kingdom ceremony. After all, the Myriad Kingdom ceremony was a competition of the quality of the soldiers. Could it be that Yi Hao could use these herbs to increase the strength of all the soldiers? Yi Hao didn't explain further, but the two girls guessed correctly, because these herbs were exactly what he needed to concoct the peak martial sage pill. After all, it took him more than a month to collect all these things. Of course, if he relied on himself, he wouldn't be able to do it in a month. After all, even if he knew the herbs he needed, he didn't know where to find them. This was all thanks to Guoshiwefu, who was a top student who had helped him a lot. Now, he had collected all the herbs except for the most important one, the divine primary grass. If he wanted to concoct the peak martial sage pill, he could use other herbs to replace it, but the divine primary grass was irreplaceable. However, according to Guoshiwefu, the divine primary grass was extremely rare in the Myriad Kingdom continent. She had read about the divine primary grass in the ancient books by chance. Shuefu, do you really not know where to find the divine primary grass? Yihao asked anxiously as he looked at Guoshiwefu. Now, he was only missing the divine primary grass. If he couldn't find the divine primary grass, everything he had done before would be in vain. Moreover, there were only 2 months left until the second round of the competition. It would take him at least a month to concoct the pill. Therefore, he didn't have much time left. Guoshiwefu frowned and thought carefully. But in the end, she shook her head and said, "There are only a few sentences in the ancient books about the growth of the divine primary grass. It doesn't say where to find it." Yihao asked, "What is the growth of the divine primary grass?" The divine primary grass is rich in energy and grows in places without any martial power, Guoshiwefu said quickly. Places without martial power? Yihao frowned and thought carefully about where there was no martial power. One had to know that in the Myriad Kingdom continent, martial power was everywhere. It was just like air. The only difference was that it was thin. Even the lowest level region was rich in martial arts power. It could be said that in the Myriad Kingdom continent, finding a place without martial power was like finding a place without air on Earth. It could be said to be incomparably difficult. So the divine primary grass might not even exist. Guoshiwefu shook her head and looked at Yihao in confusion. She didn't know why Yihao was looking for the divine primary grass. In this huge Myriad Kingdom continent, even if the divine primary grass did exist, it was undoubtedly like finding a needle in a haystack. Yihao didn't think so. He thought that since the system gave him this formula, it meant that the divine primary grass must exist in the Myriad Kingdom continent. Yihao looked at Guoshiwefu with a worried face. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he said, "Ha, the heavens are helping me." The two girls looked at Yihao speechlessly. They didn't understand what was wrong with Yihao. Why did he suddenly laugh for no reason? Ha, you're really my lucky star. Yihao pulled Guoshiwefu over and kissed her smooth forehead. Seeing the two girls in a daze, Yihao naturally wouldn't treat Mu Qingyu unfairly. He also kissed Mu Qingyu's head. At this moment, the two girls were wondering if Yihao was taking advantage of them. The two girls were blushing. Let's go. Where to? Gedanzen. Chapter 502. Guojinyu had thought that he knew Yihao quite well. However, it now seemed like he knew nothing about Yihao. Leaving everything else aside, the two martial God Realm experts alone were enough to surprise him. Which force is he from? Guojinyu could only guess that Yihao was from some God-grade force. Guojinyu looked at Yihao calmly, as if he was not affected by what was happening. This was not something an ordinary person could do, not to mention others. Even he himself would not be able to remain as calm as Yihao in this situation. Who are you, kid? Do you know that you have offended Mu Shengzhen? Yang Haoyan glared at Yihao, trying to scare Yihao with Mu Shengzhen. Mu Shengzhen was famous in the continent. He was one of the top forces in the empire. Otherwise, Mu Shengzhen would not have been able to deal with the Bishing dynasty in Gedanzen on his own. However, he was destined to be disappointed. It would have been better if he had not mentioned Mu Shengzhen. However, the moment he mentioned Mu Shengzhen, Yihao was infuriated. One had to know that Yihao still remembered the grudge of that palm strike back then. Kill him, Yihao said flatly as he glanced at Yang Haoyan. What? Yang Haoyan was stunned when he heard Yihao's words. His eyes widened as he struggled to speak. How dare you, kid? Puchi, However, what greeted him was a feather fan that stabbed into his chest. Hurry up and get rid of this trash. I have important matters to attend to. You had to not take Yang Haoyan seriously. He was just a clown. His Majesty has been killed. Run, run, run. Don't kill me. This has nothing to do with me. When they saw that Yang Haoyan had been killed, the subordinates that Yang Haoyan had brought with him scattered in all directions. Kill them. Don't leave a single one alive. Guo Jinyu was also angry with Yang Haoyan. Now was the time to vent his anger. Naturally, he wouldn't let it go easily. He didn't have time to ask Yi how. He immediately led Elder Gedanzin in charge forward. Zhuge Liang immediately rushed towards the old man and small one. Originally, the old man and small one were evenly matched. However, with the addition of Zhuge Liang, their disadvantage immediately became apparent. No, I can't accept this. Under the attacks of Zhuge Liang and Little One, the old man could only roar unwillingly. Little One and Zhuge Liang attacked the old man at the same time. 2 bloody holes immediately appeared on the old man's body. Then, his body went limp and fell to the ground. At this moment, in Mu Shengzhen's Soul Pavilion, the elder guarding the Soul Pavilion was currently dozing off. Kacha, suddenly, the sound of something shattering rang out. The elder raised his head indifferently and took a glance. He picked up his pen and prepared to record it. Because there were too many disciples in the Soul Pavilion, there would often be disciples dying, so he was used to it. However, this time he was stunned, because this time it was the old ancestor's soul talisman that shattered. The elder was shocked. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief. When he opened his eyes again, he realized that his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. The elder didn't have time to think. He didn't even have time to put down his pen and flew towards the sect master's pavilion. Sect master, something bad has happened. The elder rushed into the sect master's pavilion in a panic. The sect master raised his head in dissatisfaction. Impudent. Can't you see that I'm discussing something with an esteemed guest? Hearing the sect master's cold voice, the elder finally noticed that there were outsiders in the main hall. The elder immediately tidied up his clothes and bowed. Sect master, please forgive me. I have something to report. What is it? The sect master suppressed the anger in his heart and asked. This. The elder saw the guest and wanted to say something, but stopped. Haha, it seems that your sect has something important. I'll take my leave first. Seeing the elder's expression, how could the guest not understand what he meant? He immediately laughed and said, Sigh. The sect master immediately stretched out his hand to stop him. He then looked at the elder and said, What is it? You don't have to beat around the bush. Yes. The elder cupped his fists and stuttered. Third. Seeing that the elder was stuttering, the sect master was even more annoyed. He shouted again, Third what? Spit it out. Hearing the sect master shout, the elder's body trembled, and he quickly said, Third elder has immortalized. What? The sect master's body stiffened when he heard this. It was because of Third elder. Third elder was Mu Shengzhen's trump card and one of the few experts in Mu Shengzhen. He was also the source of Mu Shengzhen's arrogance. The sect master could clearly feel that the esteemed guest's expression had changed. However, there was a smile at the corner of his eyes. At that moment, the sect master was furious. However, he couldn't show it in front of the esteemed guest. This esteemed guest was from the same force as him. This time, he had come to cooperate with the sect master to attack the Baisheng dynasty. However, they hadn't reached an agreement yet. Hearing the elder's words, the sect master had a bad feeling. Sure enough, the esteemed guest stood up and said, Sect Master Mu, it seems that something big has happened in your sect. I won't disturb you. Please stay. The sect master was about to speak, but the esteemed guest had already turned and left. Trash. A bunch of trash. The sect master could no longer suppress his anger when he saw that the esteemed guest had left. The guards in the hall, including the elders, all knelt down on the ground. Go and invite the rest of the patriarchs here. The sect master's face was gloomy. Also, call all the elders, hall masters, and peak masters here. No matter where it was, the death of a patriarch was not a small matter. This was because the patriarchs were the symbol of the most powerful force. The influence of the patriarchs was huge. Now that one of the patriarchs had died, the consequences were not something that the sect master could bear. At that moment, some of the elders, hall masters, and peak masters in Mu Shengzhen rushed over. Looking at the sect master's angry face and the Soul Pavilion's elders kneeling in the middle of the hall, they looked at each other but didn't dare to speak. Although they didn't know what had happened, in their opinion, it was definitely not a small matter. At that moment, a few powerful auras suddenly appeared in the air. The sect master immediately stood up from his seat and knelt on the ground to pay his respects. This unfilial disciple pays his respects to the patriarchs. May the patriarchs live as long as the heavens. The elders, hall masters, and peak masters immediately knelt on the ground and shouted respectfully, "Greetings to the patriarchs. May the patriarchs live as long as the heavens." Sect master, why are you looking for us in such a hurry? What's the matter? Suddenly, the terrifying auras outside the hall disappeared and a few elders walked in. They were no different from ordinary people. Chapter 503. Support legal and legal reading. Duplicate chapters found. Remove bookshelf and recache. Please forgive me for the inconvenience. Thank you on my knees. Guojinyu had thought that he knew Yi Hao pretty well, but from the looks of it now, he knew nothing about Yi Hao. Leaving everything else aside, the two martial God Realm experts alone were enough to surprise him. Which faction is he from? Guojinyu could only guess that Yi Hao was from some Godgrade faction. Guojinyu looked at Yi Hao calmly, as if he was not affected by what was happening. This was not something an ordinary person could do, not to mention others. Even he himself would not be able to remain as calm as Yi Hao in this situation. Who are you, kid? Do you know that you have offended Mu Shengzhen? Yang Haoyan glared at Yi Hao, trying to scare Yi Hao with Mu Shengzhen. Mu Shengzhen was famous throughout the continent. He was one of the top factions in the empire. Otherwise, Mu Shengzhen would not have been able to deal with the Bishing dynasty and Gedanzhen on his own. However, he was destined to be disappointed. It would have been better if Yang Haoyan had not mentioned Mu Shengzhen. However, the moment he mentioned Mu Shengzhen, Yi Hao was infuriated. One had to know that Yi Hao still remembered the grudge of that palm strike back then. Kill him, Yi Hao said flatly as he glanced at Yang Haoyan. What? Yang Haoyan was stunned when he heard Yi Hao's words. His eyes widened as he struggled to speak. How dare you, kid? Pucci. However, what greeted him was a feather fan that stabbed into his chest. Hurry up and get rid of this piece of trash. I have important matters to attend to. You had to not take Yang Haoyan seriously. He was just a clown. His Majesty has been killed. Run, run, run. Don't kill me. This has nothing to do with me. Seeing that Yang Haoyan had been killed, the subordinates that Yang Haoyan had brought with him immediately scattered and fled in all directions. Kill them. Don't leave a single one alive. Guojinyu was also angry with Yang Haoyan. Now was the time to vent his anger. Naturally, he wouldn't let it go easily. He didn't have time to ask Yi Hao. He immediately led Elder Gedanzhen and charged forward. Zhuge Liang immediately rushed towards the old man and small one. Originally, the old man and small one were evenly matched. However, with the addition of Zhuge Liang, their disadvantage immediately became apparent. No, I can't accept this. Under the attacks of Zhuge Liang and Little One, the old man could only roar unwillingly. Pucci, Little One, and Zhuge Liang simultaneously attacked the old man. Two bloody holes immediately appeared on the old man's body. Then his body went limp and fell to the ground. At this moment, in Mu Shengzhen's Soul Pavilion, the elder guarding the Soul Pavilion was currently dozing off. Kacha, suddenly, a cracking sound rang out. The elder didn't care and looked up. He picked up his pen and prepared to record. Because there were too many disciples in the Soul Pavilion, there would often be disciples dying. Therefore, he was already used to it. However, this time he was stunned, because this time it was the old ancestor's soul talisman that broke. The elder was shocked. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief. When he opened his eyes again, he realized that his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. The elder didn't have time to think. He didn't even have time to put down his pen. He flew towards the sect master's pavilion. Sect master, sect master, something bad has happened. The elder rushed into the sect master's pavilion in a panic. The sect master raised his head in dissatisfaction. Impudent! Can't you see that I'm discussing something with an esteemed guest? Hearing the sect master's cold voice, the elder finally noticed that there were outsiders in the main hall. The elder immediately tidied up his clothes and bowed. Sect master, please forgive me. This subordinate has something to report. What is it? The sect master suppressed the anger in his heart and asked. This. The elder saw the guest and wanted to say something, but hesitated. Haha, it seems that your sect has something important. I'll take my leave first. Seeing the elder's expression, how could the guest not understand what he meant? He immediately laughed and said, Sigh. The sect master immediately reached out his hand to stop him. He then looked at the elder. If you have something to say, just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush. Yes. The elder cupped his fists and stuttered. Third. Seeing the elder stuttering, the sect master became even more irritated and shouted again. Third what? If you have something to say it quickly. Hearing the sect master shout, the elder's body trembled, and he quickly said, The third elder has immortalized. What? The sect master's body suddenly stiffened. Because of the third elder. He was Mu Shengzhen's trump card and one of the few experts in Mu Shengzhen. And he was also the source of Mu Shengzhen's arrogance. The sect master clearly felt that the esteemed guest's expression also changed. However, there was a smile in the corner of his eyes. At that moment, the sect master was furious. However, because of the esteemed guest, he cannot show it. This esteemed guest was from the same faction as him. This time, he had come to cooperate with the sect master to attack the Bishing Holy Dynasty. However, they had not reached an agreement yet. Hearing the elder's words, the sect master had a bad feeling. Sure enough, the esteemed guest stood up and said, Sect Master Mu, it seems that something big has happened in your sect. I won't disturb you any further. Please stay. The sect master was about to speak, but the esteemed guest had already turned and left. Trash. A bunch of trash. The sect master saw that the esteemed guest had left and could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He shouted angrily. The guards in the hall, including the elders, all knelt down on the ground. Go and get the rest of the patriarchs. The sect master's face was gloomy. Also, get all the elders, hall leaders, and peak leaders here. No matter where it was, the death of the patriarchs was not a small matter. This was because the patriarchs were the symbol of the faction's strongest power. The influence of the patriarchs was also very great. Now that one of the patriarchs had died, the consequences were not something that the sect master could bear. At that moment, some of the elders, hall leaders, and peak leaders who were still in Mu Shengzhen immediately rushed over. Looking at the sect master's angry face and the Soul Pavilion's elders who were kneeling in the middle of the hall, they looked at each other and did not dare to speak. Although they did not know what had happened, in their opinion, it was definitely not a small matter. At that moment, a few powerful auras suddenly appeared in the air. The sect master immediately stood up from his seat and knelt on the ground to pay his respects. Unfilial disciple pays his respects to the patriarchs. May the patriarchs live as long as the heavens. The elders, hall leaders, and peak leaders immediately knelt on the ground and shouted respectfully, Greetings to the patriarchs. May the patriarchs live as long as the heavens. Sect master, why are you in such a hurry to find us? What's the matter? Suddenly, the terrifying auras outside the hall disappeared and a few elders walked in. They were no different from ordinary people. Chapter 504. Sect Leader, Emperor When requests to see you. Suddenly, a guard's voice came from outside the door. Let him in, the sect leader said angrily. Greetings, sect leader. What's wrong? Why are you so angry? Emperor When walked in and bowed respectfully. Seeing that something was wrong with the sect leader, He asked. It's all because of useless trash like you. All of you failed at the Myriad Kingdom Grand Ceremony, the sect leader said angrily. Emperor Wen was embarrassed. He didn't expect the sect leader to say it so directly. What are you doing here? Aren't you going to help that Emperor Hashan? Why are you here? The sect leader asked in confusion. He didn't think that Emperor Wen would come here for no reason. I'm here because I suffered great losses at the Myriad Kingdom Grand Ceremony. So, I'm here to ask for your help, Emperor Wen said with a smile. Help you? How? The sect leader's expression changed at the mention of help. Looking at the sect leader's gloomy expression, Emperor Wen was shocked. He thought about it carefully and realized that he didn't say anything wrong. Sect leader, what's wrong? Emperor Wen didn't understand what was going on. He could only ask carefully, do you know Yang Haoyan? The sect leader knew that he couldn't hide it anymore and asked coldly. Of course I know Emperor Yang. Speaking of which, the two of us are in the same boat. As a member of Mu Shengzhen's imperial dynasty, Emperor Wen naturally knew Yang Haoyan. He's dead. What? How is that possible? Who did it? Why didn't I receive any news? Hearing the sect leader's words, the smile on Emperor Wen's face froze. He couldn't maintain his composure as an emperor and shouted in shock. The death of an emperor of imperial dynasty was definitely not a small matter. Moreover, Yang Haoyan was also under Mu Shengzhen's command. If he was really dead, it was impossible that he didn't receive any news. If he was the only one who died, even if the entire imperial dynasty died, I wouldn't feel it was a pity. Sect leader, what do you mean? Emperor Wen couldn't figure out why the sect leader would say something like that. It's because of Yang Haoyan that the third patriarch of Mu Shengzhen was killed. The sect leader could no longer remain calm and roared. Upon hearing the sect leader's words, Emperor Wen was dumbfounded. He finally understood why the sect leader was so angry. He didn't expect things to be so serious. The death of Mu Shengzhen's third patriarch was no small matter. What is it made of? The shock on Emperor Wen's face had yet to disappear. Gedanzin. The sect master gritted his teeth as he spat out the name Gedanzin. He couldn't wait to tear Gedanzin into pieces. Emperor Wen was stunned. He frowned and asked, didn't you say that there are no martial gods in Gedanzin? How could someone be able to kill the third old ancestor? Could it be that Gedanzin is hiding his strength, or that someone is helping Gedanzin? No, I believe that Gedanzin isn't hiding his strength. Someone is helping him. Sect leader, are you talking about the Bishing dynasty? At this point, the sect leader couldn't help but look at Emperor Wen. In his opinion, it was most likely the Bishing dynasty who had done it. In the past few months, the two forces had been fighting non-stop and the sect leader had taken advantage of the situation. They had only stopped fighting after the grand ceremony had begun. Therefore, in his opinion, the Bishing dynasty had suffered a loss and wanted to make up for it. This seemed normal. Moreover, in his opinion, the Bishing dynasty had an unusual relationship with Gedanzin. Therefore, it was reasonable for the Bishing dynasty to take action. Sect leader, at this point, Emperor Wen was embarrassed to speak. However, if he didn't speak, he would feel indignant. Therefore, he asked awkwardly. The sect leader was about to refuse because he didn't have the energy to care about these things. Sect leader, Zhao Yang requests an audience. Suddenly, a guard shouted from outside the door. The sect leader couldn't help but frown. He didn't realize that there were so many things happening. What was going on today? Things were happening one after another. By the way, who is Zhao Yang? Most importantly, he tried to search his mind for any information about Zhao Yang, but he couldn't find anything. Sect leader, that's Zhao Xian, an elder of the spiritual pill sect. Seeing the sect leader's puzzled face, a guard immediately reminded him in a low voice. So it's him. The sect leader's eyes lit up. Originally, he didn't want to see Zhao Yang. However, he suddenly changed his mind, because according to what he knew, this Zhao Yang had a relationship with the ancient alchemy sect. Let him in. The sect leader sat back on the sect leader's throne. Soon, an old man ran in from outside the hall. He immediately knelt on the ground and cowed out. Greetings, sect leader. Zhao Yang, how have you been in Mu Shengzhen these days? The sect leader asked in a concerned tone. It would have been better if the sect leader didn't ask. Once the sect leader asked, Zhao Yang immediately poured out all the grievances in his heart. In the past, no matter what, in the spiritual pill sect, he was second only to the sect leader and above everyone else. However, when he arrived at Mu Shengzhen, he realized that there was always someone better than him. His strength was not worth mentioning in Mu Shengzhen. During this period of time, he had been bullied and humiliated by many people. He was living a miserable life. Impudent. The sect leader suddenly shouted angrily. Emperor Wen couldn't help but look at the sect leader. Zhao Yang, who was kneeling on the ground, trembled violently. He thought that he had said something wrong and hurriedly begged for mercy. Please forgive me, sect leader. What crime have you committed? The sect leader waved his hand. You are my distinguished guest. Those ignorant fools who are disrespectful to you are disrespectful to me. They can't be easily forgiven. Guards, disciple is here. Sect leader, please give your orders. Go and find out who has been disrespectful to Elder Zhao Yang. Punish them severely. Yes. Hearing the sect leader's words, the disciple immediately bowed and walked out of the main hall. Thank you, sect leader, for upholding justice for me. Zhao Yang was immediately grateful for the sect leader's actions. This originated from the fact that he had always been disliked. Suddenly receiving the sect leader's courteous treatment made him a little unable to accept it. By the way, Zhao Yang, why are you looking for me? The sect leader saw Zhao Yang's appearance and finally returned to the main topic. Sect leader, I am here for the Fire Dragon Empire. Fire Dragon Empire? Hearing the Fire Dragon Empire, the sect leader wasn't too sure. Instead, it was Emperor Wen who asked, the Fire Dragon Empire you're talking about, is it the one in Yanlong's camp? Hearing Emperor Wen's words, Zhao Yang couldn't help but look at Emperor Wen and immediately said, it is the Fire Dragon Empire. What's wrong with the Fire Dragon Empire? At the mention of Yanlong's camp, the sect leader had heard of it. It was only because of the Myriad Kingdom ceremony that Yanlong's camp was in the limelight. Chapter 505. Sect Leader, Emperor Wen requests to see you. Suddenly, a guard's voice came from outside the door. Let him in, the sect leader said angrily. Greetings, sect leader. What's wrong? Why are you so angry? Emperor Wen walked in and bowed respectfully. Seeing that something was wrong with the sect leader, he asked, it's all because of useless trash like you. All of you failed at the Myriad Kingdom grand ceremony, the sect leader said angrily. Emperor Wen was embarrassed. He didn't expect the sect leader to say it so directly. What are you doing here? Aren't you going to help that Emperor Hashan? Why are you here? The sect leader asked in confusion. He didn't think that Emperor Wen would come here for no reason. I'm here because I suffered great losses at the Myriad Kingdom grand ceremony. So, I'm here to ask for your help. Emperor Wen said with a smile. Help you? How? The sect leader's expression changed at the mention of help. Looking at the sect leader's gloomy expression, Emperor Wen was shocked. He thought about it carefully and realized that he didn't say anything wrong. Sect leader, what's wrong? Emperor Wen didn't understand what happened and could only ask carefully. Do you know Yang Haoyin? The sect leader knew that he couldn't hide it anymore and asked coldly. Of course I know Emperor Yang. Speaking of which, the two of us are in the same boat. As a member of Emperor Dynasty under Mu Shengzhen, Emperor Wen naturally knew about Yang Haoyin. He's dead. What do you mean? How is that possible? Who did it? Why didn't I receive any news? Hearing the sect leader's words, the smile on Emperor Wen's face froze. He couldn't maintain his composure as an emperor and shouted in shock. The death of an Emperor Dynasty's emperor was no small matter. Moreover, Yang Haoyin was also under Mu Shengzhen. If he was really dead, it was impossible that he didn't receive any news. If he was the only one who died, even if the entire Emperor Dynasty died, I wouldn't feel that it was a pity. Sect leader, what do you mean? Emperor Wen couldn't understand why the sect leader would say something like that. Yang Haoyin killed the third patriarch of Mu Shengzhen because of him. The sect leader couldn't remain calm and shouted. This. Emperor Wen was dumbfounded when he heard the sect master's words. He finally understood why the sect leader was enraged. He didn't expect things to be so serious. The death of the sacred reverent sect's third old ancestor was no small matter. What is it made of? The shock on Emperor Wen's face had yet to disappear. Gedanzen. The sect master gritted his teeth as he said the words ancient alchemy sect. Right now, he wished he could tear the ancient alchemy sect to pieces. How could someone kill the third old ancestor? Are you saying that Gedanzen is hiding his strength, or that someone is helping Gedanzen? No, I believe that Gedanzen isn't hiding his strength. Someone is helping him. Sect leader, are you talking about the Bai Shang dynasty? At this point, the sect master glanced at Emperor Wen. In his opinion, the Bishing sacred dynasty was the culprit. In the past few months, the two forces had been fighting non-stop, and the sect leader had taken advantage of the situation. They had only stopped fighting after the grand ceremony began. Therefore, in his opinion, the Bishing sacred dynasty had suffered a loss, so they wanted to make up for it. It seemed very normal. In his opinion, the Bishing dynasty had a special relationship with Gedanzen. Therefore, it was reasonable for the Bai Shang dynasty to take action. Then, sect leader, Emperor Wen was embarrassed to speak. However, if he didn't speak, he wouldn't be satisfied. The sect leader was about to refuse because he didn't have the energy to care about these things. Sect leader, Zhao Yang is here to see you. Suddenly, a guard shouted from outside the door. The sect leader frowned. He didn't realize that there were so many things happening. What was going on today? Things were happening one after another. By the way, who is Zhao Yang? Most importantly, he tried to search for information about Zhao Yang in his mind. However, he couldn't find anything. Sect leader, that is Zhao Xian. He is an elder of the spiritual pill sect. Seeing the sect leader's puzzled face, a guard whispered to him. It's him. The sect leader's eyes lit up. Originally, he didn't want to see Zhao Yang. However, he suddenly changed his mind. Because according to what he knew, this Zhao Yang had a relationship with the ancient alchemy sect. Let him in. The sect leader sat back on the sect leader's throne. Soon, an old man ran in from outside the hall. He immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Greetings, sect leader. Zhao Yang, how had you been in Mushengzhen recently? The sect leader asked in a concerned tone. It would have been better if the sect leader didn't ask. Zhao Yang immediately poured out all the grievances in his heart. In the past, no matter what, he was above everyone else in the spiritual pill sect. He was the one who kept his word. However, when he arrived at Mushengzhen, he realized that there was always someone better than him. His strength was not worth mentioning in Mushengzhen. During this time, he had been bullied a lot. He was living a miserable life. Impudent. The sect leader suddenly shouted angrily. Emperor Wen couldn't help but look at the sect leader. Zhao Yang, who was kneeling on the ground, trembled violently. He thought that he had said something wrong and quickly begged for mercy. Please forgive me, sect leader. What crime have you committed? The sect leader waved his hand. You are my distinguished guest. Those ignorant fools who are disrespectful to you are disrespectful to me. They cannot be easily forgiven. Guard, disciple is here. Please give your orders, sect leader. Go and find out who has been disrespectful to Elder Zhao Yang. Punish them severely. Yes. Hearing the sect leader's words, the disciple immediately bowed and walked out of the main hall. Thank you, sect leader, for upholding justice for me. Zhao Yang was immediately grateful for the sect leader's actions. This originated from the fact that he had always been disliked. He couldn't accept the sect leader's courteous treatment so suddenly. By the way, Zhao Yang, why are you looking for me? The sect leader saw Zhao Yang's appearance and finally returned to the main topic. Sect leader, I'm here for the Fire Dragon Empire. Fire Dragon Empire? Hearing the Fire Dragon Empire, the sect leader wasn't too sure. Instead, it was Emperor Wen who asked, the Fire Dragon Empire you're talking about, is it the one in Yanlong's camp? Hearing Emperor Wen's words, Zhao Yang couldn't help but look at Emperor Wen and immediately said, is the Fire Dragon Empire? What's wrong with the Fire Dragon Empire? At the mention of Yanlong's camp, the sect leader had heard of it. It was only because of the Myriad Kingdom ceremony that Yanlong's camp was in the limelight. Chapter 506. By the way, why do you want to enter Roaring Beast Valley? Guo Jinyu asked curiously. I need a spiritual herb. What spiritual herb? You have to ask as much as you can. Gedanzin has nothing but spiritual herbs. Why do I need to enter Roaring Beast Valley? Guo Jinyu looked at Yi Hao and said generously. Gedanzin was a place where alchemy reigned supreme. Naturally, all kinds of spiritual herbs were needed to refine elixir pills. It could be said that Gedanzin had all kinds of spiritual herbs. What they didn't lack the least was spiritual herbs. Yi Hao shook his head. I don't think Gedanzin has this spiritual herb. Yi Hao's words piqued Guo Jinyu's interest. He asked unhappily, what kind of spiritual herb is it? Even Gedanzin doesn't have it. Xingyuan grass. Xingyuan grass. Hearing Yi Hao's words, Guo Jinyu was obviously stunned. This was because he was also unfamiliar with Xingyuan grass. Dad, Xingyuan grass is a rare spiritual herb in ancient books. I suspect that this world might not even have it. Maybe it's just fiction. Seeing Guo Jinyu's puzzled face, Guo Xuefu immediately explained. Guo Jinyu was relieved after hearing Guo Xuefu's words. After all, he had said that Gedanzin wanted all kinds of spiritual herbs. Now that there was a spiritual herb that he had never heard of, wasn't that a slap to his face? Therefore, he was a little embarrassed due to the pressure of work. Fortunately, Guo Xuefu came out to help him relieve the awkwardness. However, Guo Jinyu was even better. Why would Yi Hao want a spiritual herb that he had never heard of? Could it be that Yi Hao was an alchemist? Guo Jinyu looked at Yi Hao's age and guessed that Yi Hao was just bored and wanted to refine elixir pills for fun. After all, Yi Hao's martial arts were already abnormal. How could his alchemy be abnormal? Guo Jinyu couldn't help but exhort, refining elixir pills isn't that easy. It has to be like martial arts. You have to be down to earth and move forward step by step. Guo Jinyu was worried that Yi Hao was young and impetuous and would think of everything too easily. Listening to his future father-in-law's lecture, Yi Hao nodded. After all, he couldn't embarrass Guo Jinyu in front of everyone. Hearing that Yi Hao was being scolded by Guo Jinyu, Guo Xuefu couldn't stand it anymore. After all, Yi Hao was her man. She couldn't let others look at him like that. Father, who said that Yi Hao's alchemy isn't good. Yi Hao is also a genius in alchemy, Guo Xuefu said unhappily. Oh, is that so? What's Yi Hao's level? Guo Jinyu's curiosity was aroused when he heard what his daughter said. After all, his entire life was spent dealing with medicinal pills. He was naturally willing to see some alchemy geniuses. Guo Xuefu was immediately speechless because she didn't know what Yi Hao's alchemy profession was like. Just now, she was just venting her anger. Junior sister, since he's so good, why don't you let me have a written test with him? Guo Xuefu was Gedanzin's goddess. She was the existence that countless young talents in Gedanzin wanted. But now that Guo Xuefu was in Yi Hao's hands, and she was speaking up for Yi Hao, the group of disciples couldn't accept it. At this moment, Huang Yu stood up and said. Huang Yu looked at Yi Hao provocatively. I can't beat you in martial arts, but I don't believe that I can't beat you in alchemy. No matter what, Gedanzin was second to none in the world of alchemy in the 10,000 countries continent. Although Gedanzin was in decline, Gedanzin was still a superior alchemy school. In the alchemy school, they still had the right to speak. Huang Yu was also one of the best among the younger generation in Gedanzin. He had always been a genius since he was young. In his alchemy profession, he had been rising rapidly. Therefore, he was confident that he could defeat Yi Hao. Sorry, I have something important to do. I don't have time to talk nonsense. Yi Hao glanced at Huang Yu and said, what a joke. He was now focused on finding the primary saint grass and refining the peak martial sage elixir. He didn't have time to deal with Huang Yu's boring written test. Huang Yu was speechless. He didn't expect Yi Hao to not give him any face. Seeing that all his junior brothers were standing there, Huang Yu was naturally unwilling to let it go. Senior brother, this kid is too arrogant. Junior brother, you're Gedanzin's genius. You can't let this kid go so easily. Senior brother, you must compete with him. Show him the power of our Gedanzin. Seeing that the goddess of their dreams, Guo Xuefu, had been snatched away by Yi Hao, all the senior and junior brothers were jealous and started to speak up. They were trying to provoke Huang Yu so that he could compete with Yi Hao. Guo Jinyu didn't think highly of Yi Hao, so he was afraid that he would embarrass Yi Hao. He coughed and said, "Don't mess around." Since the sect leader had spoken, the disciples naturally didn't dare to say anything else. Huang Yu was still unwilling to give up. Sect leader, Junior's sister, said that this kid's alchemy skills are excellent. I just want to learn from him. There shouldn't be anything wrong with this, right? Guo Jinyu glared at Huang Yu. He didn't expect this kid to be so insensible. He was really afraid that he would anger Yi Hao. If Yi Hao decided to use force to settle this, he wouldn't be able to stop him. That's right, sect leader. Let us learn from him. Alchemy skills are all friends. Since he's a genius, why not let us broaden our horizons? Seeing that the disciples were speaking up one after another, Huang Yu was secretly pleased. He looked at Yi Hao even more provocatively. In his opinion, Yi Hao didn't agree until now because Guo Shuefu was bragging for him. If he was really capable, why didn't he dare to compete with him in writing? Forget it. He doesn't think highly of us. He can't be bothered to compete with us, Huang Yu deliberately said. Huang Yu's words were like a fuse that ignited a bomb, instantly igniting everyone's emotions. Chapter 508. It really works. After using the transmission talisman, Yi Hao found himself in Gedanzan. Yi Hao identified the direction and continued to fly towards the roaring Beast Valley. Now that he had the transmission talisman, at least his safety was guaranteed. Just now, he had clearly sensed a few powerful auras approaching. Who knew if there were any martial god-level existences in the roaring Beast Valley? If there were third-order martial god and below, he could rely on Zhuge Liang. If there were third-order martial god and above, he would be in danger. But with the transmission talisman, it was different. If he couldn't win, he could escape. Yi Hao flew to the entrance of the roaring Beast Valley and found that no one had left yet. Huang Yu, on the other hand, had a sneer on his face. What made Yi Hao most angry was that Huang Yu's eyes kept darting between Guo Shuefu and Mu Qingyu. "Brat, what are you looking at?" Yi Hao gave up on his plan to enter the roaring Beast Valley and walked behind Huang Yu, patting his shoulder. Huang Yu was admiring Guo Shuefu and Mu Qingyu's beautiful figures, and his lower body was reacting. Suddenly being patted from behind, he was startled, but his face was immediately filled with anger. In Gedanzan, he was one of the best. Someone dared to disturb his interest. Huang Yu was unhappy. Huang Yu rolled up his sleeves, turned around, and punched Yi Hao, completely ignoring who Yi Hao was. Trash! Seeing that Huang Yu only had the strength of a martial emperor, Yi Hao slapped Huang Yu's face. Slap! The crisp sound of the slap attracted everyone's attention. Because Yi Hao's back was facing everyone, they could only see Huang Yu, who was holding his face in a daze. They did not see Yi Hao. Heavens, it can't be. Senior brother Huang Yu was hit. What the hell is going on? Why is it that senior brother Huang Yu is always on the losing end? Wait a minute, the person who hit him. Why do I feel a little familiar? Everyone looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. Immediately after, everyone felt a sense of satisfaction. This was because Huang Yu had used his talent to bully many people in Gedanzan. Many of the people who were bullied by Huang Yu felt great when they saw Huang Yu's swollen face. However, everyone was curious. Who in Gedanzan would be so bold as to hit Huang Yu? Moreover, one had to know that Huang Yu was not only a genius in alchemy, he was also not bad in martial arts. He was already a martial emperor at such a young age. He was considered one of the best in Gedanzan. But now, he had been slapped in the face. Just when everyone thought that Huang Yu was about to explode, Huang Yu actually retreated. "It's you. How is this possible?" Huang Yu looked angrily at Yi Hao. He wanted to know who had the guts to hit him. But when he saw that it was Yi Hao, Huang Yu suddenly cried out, "Didn't you enter the Beast Roar Valley?" Huang Yu asked in confusion. Just now, he had seen Yi Hao enter the Beast Roar Valley with his own eyes. But why would Yi Hao appear in front of him? Didn't they say that one could only enter the Beast Roar Valley and not leave? Hearing Huang Yu's words, Everyone immediately remembered why Yi Hao's back looked so familiar. Then, there was an uproar. They were puzzled and shocked by Yi Hao's appearance. Yi Hao, why did you come out so quickly? Did you find the divine yuan grass? Guo Xuefu and Mu Qingyu immediately flew in front of Yi Hao and asked. Yi Hao shook his head. I picked up some teleportation talismans at the entrance of the Beast Roar Valley and wanted to test them out. Then, Yi Hao took out a bunch of teleportation talismans. Guo Jinyu looked at the teleportation talismans in Yi Hao's hands, and a complicated expression appeared in his eyes. This is Gudanzan's teleportation talismans. Dad, you sent people into the Beast Roar Valley? Guo Xuefu looked at Guo Jinyu and asked. Guo Jinyu nodded. When I saw that Yi Hao could come out, I thought that others could too. But obviously it was impossible. Guo Jinyu smiled bitterly as he spoke. Yi Hao understood Guo Jinyu's actions very well. After all, humans had an instinctive yearning for the mysterious. Even he was no exception. Yi Hao didn't say much to Guo Jinyu and immediately entered the Beast Roar Valley. After all, time was precious. But when he entered the Beast Roar Valley and opened his eyes, he was instantly dumbfounded. What the hell is this? Yi Hao immediately shouted. It wasn't that he was timid. It was just that the scene that suddenly appeared in front of him was too frightening. Yi Hao looked carefully and realized that he was surrounded by more than 10 people. No, these weren't people. This was because although each of these people had a human body, none of them had a human head. Yi Hao looked carefully and realized that there were leopard heads, elephant heads, snake heads, and fox heads. Yi Hao really wondered if this was the rhythm of a masquerade ball. Unsurprisingly, these 10 pairs of eyes were staring at him with complicated expressions. Because from these eyes he could see joy, excitement, disbelief, and all kinds of complicated expressions. Don't tell me they want to eat me, Yi Hao thought guiltily. Moreover, that wasn't all. Surrounding these 10-plus people, there was also a dense swarm of ancient mutated beasts. Why am I so unlucky? Yi Hao was speechless. This time, he had really fallen into a wolf's den. Yi Hao looked at these people warily. At the same time, he secretly held the transportation talisman in his hand. Sensing the aura of these people, each of them was at least a peak martial sage. Yi Hao was secretly shocked. And besides these 10 people, there were also many powerful auras. Unsurprisingly, if these people attacked him at the same time, he would definitely be turned into minced meat in an instant. Whoosh! The snake-headed person stuck his tongue out at Yi Hao. Hee, I didn't expect you to be such a handsome guy. The fox-headed person suddenly giggled. Hearing this seductive voice, Yi Hao felt that it was very pleasant to the ears. But when he saw that the fox-headed person was still grinning, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth, Yi Hao couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. Yi Hao looked carefully, not daring to relax at all. He had to use the transportation talisman at the critical moment. Otherwise, he would be in deep trouble. I advise you not to waste your time. I guarantee that the moment you use the transportation talisman, we will tear you to pieces first. The leopard-headed person seemed to have seen through Yi Hao's thoughts and said directly. Hearing this, Yi Hao's heart skipped a beat. This is going to be troublesome. If these people weren't on guard, it would be fine. He could use the transportation talisman when they weren't paying attention. But now that they were prepared, it would be even more difficult to use the transportation talisman. Chapter 509. Even so, that did not mean that Yi Hao was going to give up just like that. Even if he did not use the teleportation talisman, he still had Zhuge Liang and Xiao Yi. The moment he entered the Beast Roar Valley, he had made complete preparations. He had thought of all the dangers he would encounter. Kid, if you listen to me, I might spare your life. The man with the lion head said arrogantly to Yi Hao. Ancient beast, three-eyed purple gold lion. Looking at the lion head, Yi Hao immediately recalled the description of a lion. The three-eyed purple gold lion had long disappeared from the records of the 10,000 Kingdoms continent. Moreover, the three-eyed purple gold lion was born with a powerful bloodline. It would be easy for it to break through to the martial saint realm. It was even possible for it to break through to the martial god realm. Moreover, the three-eyed purple gold lion was born with a powerful innate ability. It could fight against other magical beasts of the same level. Yi Hao did not expect to see a three-eyed purple gold lion here. Don't be rude. Suddenly, an old man's aura came from the group of magical beasts. Even though the aura was old, it was full of energy. Yi Hao looked around and saw an old man over 2 meters tall. The only difference was that the old man's head was that of a normal person's. The old man had a head of silver hair and looked very energetic. The old man held a walking stick made of some unknown wood in his hand and slowly walked towards Yi Hao. Old Gua, seeing the old man, the group of magical beasts immediately saluted him. Stand up. The old man smiled amiably. The group of magical beasts immediately retreated to the side and waited for the old man's instructions. Lord, this person is very strong. I am not his opponent. Zhuge Liang's consciousness had been attached to Yi Hao all this time. Sensing the old man's unfathomable aura, Zhuge Liang transmitted his voice to Yi Hao. Yi Hao was secretly shocked. If Zhuge Liang said that he was not his opponent, wouldn't that mean that the old man's cultivation was at least 4th-order martial god? This time, he was really unlucky. Yi Hao looked at the old man cautiously. Although he wasn't a match for him, it didn't mean that he would give up so easily. Child, you must be Gedanzhen's disciple. To Yi Hao's surprise, the old man did not attack him. Instead, he smiled and looked at him. Hearing the old man's question, Yi Hao couldn't help but frown. How did this old man know Gedanzhen's name? Could it be from the mouths of those who were already dead? Yi Hao still did not let down his guard and was prepared to fight to the death at any moment. Seeing Yi Hao looking at him warily, the old man didn't blame him. He smiled and asked, "Do you find it strange that I know about Gedanzhen?" Yi Hao looked at the old man suspiciously. He didn't deny it and nodded. "I am Gedanzhen, the patriarch of the Guo family, Guo Yifan." The old man seemed to be reminiscing. "What? You are Guo Yifan?" Yi Hao was stunned when he heard Guo Yifan's name. Guo Yifan's name might seem ordinary and unremarkable. However, Yi Hao had often heard Guo Xuefu mention it. This was because Guo Yifan was one of the few martial gods in Gedanzhen. "It seems that you know my name, kid. It seems that this group of kids isn't too heartless." Guo Yifan saw that Yi Hao had heard of his name. He couldn't help but feel a little satisfied. After all, he had been cooped up here for so long and had finally met someone he could talk to. However, Yi Hao pointed at the blood on the ground and said, "Since you are Gedanzhen's patriarch, why didn't you help Gedanzhen's disciple when he entered Roaring Beast Valley?" Yi Hao stared fixedly at Guo Yifan. If Guo Yifan was really Gedanzhen's patriarch, how could he bear to see Gedanzhen's disciple die at the hands of a demonic beast? No matter what, they were his disciples and grand-disciples. It was as if he had already known that Yi Hao would ask this question. Guo Yifan sighed and explained directly. It turned out that there was someone as powerful as Guo Yifan in this Roaring Beast Valley. The two of them had an agreement that Guo Yifan could roam around the Roaring Beast Valley as he pleased. Similarly, the ancient demonic beast would be at his beck and call and would enjoy the treatment of King. Similarly, Guo Yifan was not allowed to save any life outside the Roaring Beast Valley. If Guo Yifan violated the agreement, that powerful person would kill him at all costs. This was also the reason why Guo Yifan did not do anything when Gedanzhen's disciple was killed. Although Yi Hao could understand Guo Yifan's predicament, Yi Hao despised Guo Yifan's actions. Because no matter what, Guo Yifan was Gedanzhen's patriarch. As a patriarch, he naturally had to protect the lives of his disciples and grand-disciples, even if he had to sacrifice his own life. However, Guo Yifan had ignored the lives of Gedanzhen's disciple for his own sake. This made Yi Hao feel bad. As if he could read Yi Hao's mind, Guo Yifan explained again, "Moreover, the Roaring Beast Valley is in danger again and we can't go out. Even if I save them, I won't be able to save them forever. However, if they die, then everything will be resolved and I won't have to suffer anymore. Moreover, Gedanzhen has a rule that strictly prohibits people from entering the Roaring Beast Valley. What can I do if they insist on coming in?" After hearing Gui Yifun's words, Yi Hao felt that they made sense. However, he still felt that something was amiss, and he did not understand what was going on. Then, Elder Gua, you mean you want to kill me? Yi Hao looked at Gui Yifun and asked. No. Gua Yifun shook his head. If I want to kill you, you would have died 10,000 times already. Then, what does Elder Gua want to do? Yi Hao knew very well that one who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Therefore, Gui Yifun had to have something to do with him personally. Nothing, I just have one thing I want to ask. What is it? Hearing that Gui Yifun had something to ask, Yi Hao was even more puzzled. No matter what was Gui Yifun's experience, and what did he want to ask him? However, Yi Hao could see that everyone was looking at him eagerly. Immediately, Yi Hao had a rough idea of what was going on. Unsurprisingly, Gui Yifun must be dying to know how to leave the Roaring Beast Valley. After all, Gui Yifun had been in the Roaring Beast Valley for at least a few hundred years. If a person had been in a place for a few hundred years and still could not get out, then what was the difference between this place and a prison? I want to know, what method did you use to leave this Beast Roar Valley? Indeed, when Yi Hao heard Gui Yifun's question, it was just as he had guessed. I used a transportation talisman. Since Gui Yifun was Gedanzan's patriarch, he was Gui Shuefu's patriarch as well. Therefore, Yi Hao did not hide anything from him. Chapter 510. Gui Yifun no longer had a harmonious smile on his face like before. Instead, he didn't look too happy. Gui Yifun squinted at Yi Hao. He didn't quite believe Yi Hao's words. If it was really as Yi Hao said, that they could leave this place by using a teleportation talisman. If that was the case, he wouldn't be staying here. You don't believe me? Yi Hao guessed that Gui Yifun wouldn't believe him. He immediately took out a teleportation talisman and used it. Yi Hao disappeared from the spot. Gui Yifun was stunned. He didn't even have to rub his eyes. Patriarch, did you sense anything else? Patriarch, did that kid really use a teleportation talisman? Everyone immediately asked Gui Yifun when they saw Yi Hao leave. Gui Yifun shook his head. It seems like that kid really used a teleportation talisman. Doesn't that mean we have a chance to get out of here? Everyone was excited when they heard Gui Yifun's words. They roared like beasts. But can that kid bring us out? The person with the leopard head asked. Everyone quieted down when they heard the leopard head's words. Although Yi Hao could leave this place, the real problem was whether he could bring them out or not. Gui Yifun sneered. Don't worry. I'll pretend to be his patriarch. That kid will definitely bring us out of here. Patriarch, you have great foresight. Everyone immediately complimented when they saw the patriarch's expression. As long as we can get out of this godforsaken place, the outside world will fall under our feet. Patriarch, those people are delicious. Can I have my fill after we get out of here? Haha, you can eat as much as you want. They're just a bunch of greedy trash. Everyone started chatting happily. And that kid, he can come and go as he pleases. He must have some secret. I must dig it out. Gui Yifun sneered. Shuefu, are you sure that Patriarch Gui Yifun is really dead? Yi Hao asked Gui Shuefu anxiously as soon as he got out of Roaring Beast Valley. Gui Shuefu looked puzzled. She did not understand why Yi Hao would ask this. Guo Jinyu immediately said, Patriarch Gui Yifun's soul crystal has been shattered in less than a month after he entered Beast Roaring Valley. Therefore, Patriarch Gui Yifun must have immortalized. Why do you ask? Yi Hao's heart tightened. There was indeed something wrong with that Gui Yifun in Roaring Beast Valley. Actually, Yi Hao knew from the very beginning that Gui Yifun was dead. Gui Shuefu had told him this personally. Therefore, when Gui Yifun in Roaring Beast Valley revealed his name, Yi Hao was also stunned. But luckily, he pretended not to know. Master, I seem to have sensed the aura of my companion just now. However, that aura was stronger than mine, so I didn't dare to reveal any of it. At this moment, the devourer in his mind suddenly spoke up. Could it be that Gui Yifun is also speaking for the devourer beast? Doesn't that mean that there is an origin fragment in the Beast Roar Valley? Yi Hao thought excitedly when he heard the devourer beast's words. It's fine. One had to know that Gui Yifun was a fourth-order martial god. Even Yi Hao couldn't help but feel pressured. In order not to arouse any worries, Yi Hao smiled and shook his head. To avoid arousing Guo Yifun's suspicions, Yi Hao could only head straight into the Beast Roar Valley. Patriarch, you should believe this kid's words this time. Yi Hao didn't show the slightest hint of surprise when he saw Guo Yifan. He smiled respectfully. Seeing that Yi Hao had reappeared, Guo Yifan sneered in his heart. However, on the surface, he maintained a harmonious smile and nodded his head in satisfaction. All right, Patriarch wants to ask you why we can't leave this place, but you can? Guo Yifan narrowed his eyes as he looked at Yi Hao. Everyone also looked at Yi Hao nervously. Yi Hao revealed a cautious expression as he looked at everyone. Patriarch, there are too many people here. Kid, you're quite careful. Come with me. Patriarch chuckled. Yi Hao scratched his head in embarrassment. There's no one here. Hurry up and tell Patriarch how you did it. Guo Yifan pulled Yi Hao to a secluded corner and couldn't wait to ask. Yi Hao immediately looked around and said mysteriously, "It's because of a treasure." As expected, Guo Yifan heard Yi Hao's confession. It was just as he had guessed. Yi Hao really had a secret. But what could he do? He still had to obediently fall into his trap. What treasure? Let Patriarch take a look. Yi Hao looked around again and took out a mind control pill from his spatial ring. Patriarch, this is the treasure. Elixir? Seeing the elixir in Yi Hao's hand, Guo Yifan couldn't help but frown. He couldn't imagine that the treasure Yi Hao was talking about was actually a pill. Guo Yifan looked warily at the pill in Yi Hao's hand. This is the treasure you're talking about? That's right, Patriarch. This is a treasure refined by our sect leader. I ate this, which is why I can freely enter and exit the Roaring Beast Valley. Yi Hao lied without batting an eyelid. Your sect leader refined it? Guo Yifan looked suspiciously at Yi Hao. That's right. Our sect leader wholeheartedly wanted to enter the Roaring Beast Valley, so he spent his entire life refining a few of these pills. Yi Hao made up a lie. How many of these pills do you have? Guo Yifan observed Yi Hao carefully and realized that Yi Hao had a serious expression on his face. He couldn't tell that he was lying at all. Therefore, he half believed and half doubted Yi Hao's words. If Yi Hao had 2 pills, then he would take one out and let his subordinate use it to test the authenticity of the pill. Yi Hao said with a pained expression, "There are a total of 3 pills. The sect leader has 1. I ate 1, and the one in your hand is the only one left." Guo Yifan finally believed Yi Hao when he saw the pained expression on Yi Hao's face as he stared at the pill in his hand. Moreover, Yi Hao looked so honest. He probably wouldn't lie to him. Moreover, he had had enough of this godforsaken place. It wasn't easy now. Now that there was a chance to get out, how could he let it go? Guo Yifan glanced at the pill in his hand, then looked at Yi Hao. Then he popped the pill into his mouth. This old man is really cunning. Yi Hao sneered his heart when he saw Guo Yifan swallow the pill. Since he didn't hear the system's notification, it meant that Guo Yifan didn't eat the pill at all. He was just pretending just now. Since you want to pretend, then let's see who's better. Yi Hao sneered at himself. Patriarch, what do you think? This is a teleportation talisman. Quickly use it and see. Yi Hao took out a teleportation talisman and handed it to Guo Yifan. Guo Yifan heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Yi Hao didn't look like he was faking it. Looks like I was being paranoid. Only then did Guo Yifan swallow the elixir in his mouth with ease. Chapter 511. Guo Yifan smiled as he looked at Yi Hao. He didn't look too happy. If it was really as Yi Hao said, that he could leave this place with a teleportation talisman, then he wouldn't stay here. You don't believe me? Yi Hao guessed that Guo Yifan wouldn't believe him. He immediately used a teleportation talisman, and Yi Hao disappeared on the spot. Guo Yifan was stunned. He didn't even have to rub his eyes. Patriarch, did you feel anything else? Patriarch, did that kid really use a teleportation talisman? Everyone immediately asked Guo Yifan when they saw Yi Hao leave. Guo Yifan shook his head. That kid really did use a teleportation talisman. Then we have a chance to get out. Everyone was excited when they heard Gua Yifun's words. They all roared. "But can that kid bring us out?" The person with the leopard head asked. Everyone quieted down when they heard the leopard head's words. Although Yi Hao could leave this place, the real problem was whether he could bring them out or not. Gui Yifun sneered. "Don't worry. I'll pretend to be his patriarch. That kid will definitely bring us out." "Patriarch, you have foresight." Everyone smiled and complimented the patriarch when they saw his expression. "As long as we get out of this godforsaken place, the outside world will fall under our feet." "Patriarch, those people are delicious. Can I have as much as I want after we get out?" "Haha, you can eat as much as you want. They're just a bunch of greedy trash." Everyone started talking happily. "And that kid, he can come and go as he pleases. He must have some secret. I must find out." Gui Yifun sneered. "Shuefu, are you sure that Patriarch Gui Yifun is really dead?" Yi Hao asked Gui Shuefu anxiously as soon as he left Roaring Beast Valley. Gui Shuefu was puzzled. She didn't understand why Yi Hao would ask this. Gua Jinyu immediately said, "Patriarch Gui Yifun's soul crystal has been shattered in less than a month after he entered Beast Roaring Valley. Therefore, Patriarch Gui Yifun must have immortalized." "Why do you ask?" Yi Hao's heart tightened. There was indeed something wrong with that Gui Yifun in Roaring Beast Valley. Actually, Yi Hao knew from the very beginning that Gui Yifun was dead. Gui Shuefu had told him this personally. Therefore, when Gui Yifun in Roaring Beast Valley revealed his name, Yi Hao was also stunned. But luckily, he pretended not to know. "Master, I seem to have sensed the aura of my companion just now. However, that aura was stronger than mine, so I didn't dare to reveal any of it." At this moment, the devourer in his mind suddenly spoke up. Could it be that Gui Yifun is also speaking for the devourer beast? Doesn't that mean that there is an origin fragment in the Beast Roar Valley? Yi Hao thought excitedly when he heard the devourer beast's words. It's fine. One had to know that Gui Yifun was a fourth-order martial god. Even Yi Hao couldn't help but feel pressured. In order not to arouse the devourer beast's worries, Yi Hao smiled and shook his head. To avoid arousing Gui Yifun's suspicions, Yi Hao could only head straight into the Beast Roar Valley. "Patriarch, you should believe this kid's words now, right?" Yi Hao looked at Gui Yifun and didn't show the slightest bit of surprise. He smiled respectfully and said, seeing that Yi Hao had appeared again, Gui Yifun sneered in his heart. But on the surface, he still maintained a harmonious smile and nodded his head in satisfaction. "All right, Patriarch wants to ask you, why can't we leave this place but you can?" Gui Yifun narrowed his eyes and looked at Yi Hao. Everyone also looked at Yi Hao nervously. Yi Hao revealed a cautious expression and looked at everyone. "Patriarch, there are too many people here. Kid, you're quite careful. Come with me." Patriarch chuckled. Yi Hao scratched his head embarrassedly. "There's no one here. Tell Patriarch how you did it." Gui Yifun pulled Yi Hao to a secluded corner and couldn't wait to ask. Yi Hao immediately looked around and said mysteriously, "It's because of a treasure." As expected, Gui Yifun heard Yi Hao's confession. It was just as he had guessed. Yi Hao really had a secret, but what could he do? He still had to obediently fall into his trap. "What treasure? Let Patriarch see it." Yi Hao looked around again and took out a mind control pill from his spatial ring. "Patriarch, this is the treasure." "Elixir?" Seeing the elixir in Yi Hao's hand, Gui Yifun couldn't help but frown. He couldn't imagine that the treasure Yi Hao was talking about was actually a pill. Gui Yifun looked at the pill in Yi Hao's hand cautiously. "This is the treasure you're talking about?" "That's right, Patriarch. This is a treasure refined by our sect leader. I ate this so I can enter and exit the Roaring Beast Valley freely." Yi Hao lied without batting an eyelid. "Your sect leader refined it?" Gui Yifun looked at Yi Hao suspiciously. "That's right. Our sect leader wanted to enter the Roaring Beast Valley wholeheartedly, so he spent his entire life refining a few of these pills." Yi Hao made up a lie. "How many of these pills do you have?" Gui Yifun observed Yi Hao carefully and realized that Yi Hao had a serious expression. He couldn't tell that Yi Hao was lying at all. Therefore, he half believed and half doubted Yi Hao's words. If Yi Hao had 2 pills, Then he would take one out and let his subordinates use it to test the authenticity of the pill. Yi Hao said with a pained expression, "There are a total of 3 pills. The sect leader has one. I ate one. And the one in your hand is the only one left." Guo Yifan finally believed Yi Hao when he saw the pained expression on Yi Hao's face as he stared at the pill in his hand. Moreover, Yi Hao looked so honest. He probably wouldn't lie to him. Moreover, he had had enough of staying in this godforsaken place. Now that there was a chance to get out, how could he let it go? Guo Yifan glanced at the pill in his hand, then looked at Yi Hao. Then, he popped the pill into his mouth. This old man is really cunning. Yi Hao sneered when he saw Guo Yifan swallow the pill. He didn't hear the system's notification, which meant that Guo Yifan didn't eat the pill at all. He was just pretending. Since you want to pretend, then let's see who's better. Yi Hao sneered. Patriarch, what do you think? This is a teleportation talisman. Quick, use it and see. Yi Hao took out a teleportation talisman and handed it to Guo Yifan. Guo Yifan heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Yi Hao didn't seem to be faking it. Looks like I was being paranoid. Guo Yifan swallowed the pill in his mouth. Chapter 512. The Sacred Cauldron Hall was Gedanzan's noblest place. It housed Gedanzan's only sage artifact, the Crimson Fire Cauldron. And beneath the Sacred Cauldron Hall was a natural, sacred fire vein. One had to know that refining pills not only required materials, but also a good cauldron and a fire source. A cauldron could increase the chances of success while reducing the difficulty of refining pills. And a fire source could perfectly refine the cauldron, removing the impurities in the herbs and increasing the quality of the pills. And here, only Gedanzan's Grand Supreme Elders and the Sect Master could use it. Normally, the Sacred Cauldron Hall's doors were tightly shut, clearly off-limits. Rumble. Suddenly, the Sacred Cauldron Hall's doors opened with a deafening sound. At this time, the elders and disciples below the Sacred Cauldron Hall all looked up in the direction of the Sacred Cauldron Hall. There was a sacred fire vein beneath Gedanzan, and the Sacred Cauldron Hall had the purest sacred fire. And although the sacred fire beneath the Sacred Cauldron Hall was of the same vein, it was much weaker, but that was already very good. Normally, only the elders and their favored disciples could refine pills beneath the Sacred Cauldron Hall. Why is the Sacred Cauldron Hall suddenly open? Which Grand Supreme Elder is refining pills? I don't know, I haven't heard any news. Who cares? Let's go take a look and see who's refining pills. Maybe we could take a look and broaden our horizons. Seeing the Sacred Cauldron Hall's doors open, the elders and disciples began to discuss excitedly. This was because the Sacred Cauldron Hall rarely opened. It's him? How could it be him? Nonsense. This is simply nonsense. How can an outsider enter our Sacred Cauldron Hall? Hurry and get that kid out of our sacred ground. This is completely lawless. This is too much. Everyone was enraged when they saw Yi Hao enter the Sacred Cauldron Hall, because the Sacred Cauldron Hall was their goal, their sacred ground. Even in their dreams, they dreamed of being able to refine pills in the Sacred Cauldron Hall. But there was no doubt that the requirements to enter the Sacred Cauldron Hall were very high. But now, the Sacred Cauldron Hall that they had always dreamed of was actually being entered by an outsider like Yi Hao. How could they not be angry? Huang Yu also squeezed his way out of the crowd. When he heard that the one who had entered the Sacred Furnace Hall was Yi Hao, he found it hard to accept. Grandmaster, I want to see the Grandmaster. This is simply too unfair. This is too childish. Huang Yu disregarded everything and shouted loudly in an attempt to ignite everyone's emotions. Actually, there was no need for him to instigate things. Everyone was already clamoring about how unfair it was. The sect leader has arrived. Suddenly, a loud shout rang out. Everyone immediately quieted down and opened up a path. What's wrong, everyone? Why do you look so sad? Guo Jinyu put his hands behind his back and asked with a smile. Sect Master, the Sacred Furnace Hall is the symbol of Gedanzan. How can we allow an outsider to enter? This is a stain on our sacred hall. That's right, sect leader. The divine temple must not be tainted. Let's capture that brat and punish him severely. Sect leader, that brat trespassed into our main hall. We can't let him off so easily. Everyone felt indignant as they knelt on the ground and cried out. I allowed him to enter. Guo Jinyu's expression suddenly tightened. What? Why? Hearing Guo Jinyu's words, everyone was first stunned and then puzzled. The first rule of Gedanzan was that outsiders were not allowed to enter the sacred furnace hall. The second rule was that disciples and elders were not allowed to enter the sacred furnace hall. But now, as the sect leader, Guo Jinyu was leading the way in breaking the rules by allowing an outsider to enter. How could they accept this? Guo Jinyu, as the sect leader, how can you disregard the rules of the sect? Suddenly, an elder stepped forward and pointed at Guo Jinyu's nose. How dare you? Do you still have this sect leader in your eyes? As the sect leader, Guo Jinyu was actually being pointed at by his subordinates. His gaze froze, and his face turned ashen as he looked at the elder who spoke. Suddenly, everyone could feel that the air seemed to have solidified in an instant. They could clearly feel Guo Jinyu's anger. No one dared to look directly at Guo Jinyu. Even the elder who had criticized Guo Jinyu earlier couldn't help but panic when he saw Guo Jinyu's gaze. We invite the Grand Elder to come out and enforce the sect rules. That elder was also a stubborn old man. Although he was afraid of Guo Jinyu, he still gritted his teeth and spoke. We're here. What's the matter? Just as the elder's voice fell, several people flew over from afar. They were Gedanzan's Grand Elders. Greetings, Grand Elders. Seeing the arrival of the Grand Elders, everyone immediately bowed and greeted them. This was because the Grand Elder seniority was even higher than Guo Jinyu's by a generation. Grand Elder, the sect leader, allowed an outsider to enter the sacred furnace hall without permission. Grand Elder, please uphold justice and enforce the sect rules. The elder who had warned Guo Jinyu hurriedly said when he saw the Grand Elders appear. It was as if he had found a backer. As for the Grand Elders, when they heard this, all sorts of changes occurred on their faces. Among them, the third Grand Elder looked at Guo Jinyu and sneered inwardly. He had originally been bent on getting rid of Guo Jinyu. Who would have thought that Guo Jinyu would actually seek his own death and incur the wrath of everyone? Disciples, watch as your master takes revenge for all of you. The third Grand Elder's eyes flashed with killing intent. This was because he had always suspected that his disciples, the second Grand Elder and his son, had been killed by Guo Jinyu. However, he had never been able to find any evidence. Sect leader, is what he said true? The first Grand Elder frowned slightly as he asked with a troubled expression. This was because in his heart, he was still considered neutral and supported Guo Jinyu. However, if Guo Jinyu really let Yi Hao into the sacred furnace hall, that would be a little too much. If that happened, Guo Jinyu's prestige would be reduced by more than half. It's true, Guo Jinyu admitted directly. This sighed. When he heard Guo Jinyu admit it, the first Grand Elder sighed and shook his head. Sect leader, although you're the sect leader, you have ignored the sect rules. This is a little troublesome. The third Grand Elder sneered when he saw that the first Grand Elder wasn't speaking. Then what do you want to do? Guo Jinyu stared at the third Grand Elder and asked, I think that you are not suitable to be the sect leader. You should choose someone else. Oh, then which disciple of yours is suitable? What do you mean? Although the third Grand Elder wholeheartedly wanted to grasp the position of the sect leader in his own hands, he felt that it was inappropriate for him to do so. At this moment, Guo Jinyu had shed all pretense of cordiality. This made him feel a little uncomfortable. It's fine if you don't want me to be the sect leader, but you have to ask for their opinion. Guo Jinyu's gaze swept across the crowd. Chapter 514. Pill Explosion Technique. With the help of the system, refining pills became several times easier. Hearing the system notification of completion, Zhang Xin nodded. Yi Hao didn't choose to end it. Instead, he used the pill explosion technique. Following the use of the pill explosion technique, the sacred fire below the cauldron became even more vigorous. Normally, when refining pills, one would retract the fire and let the pills condense and cool down. Then, the refinement would succeed. However, the pill explosion technique allowed the pills that were supposed to condense to break down again. It allowed the cauldron fire to refine the impurities in the pills and reassemble them into new pills. However, the pill explosion technique was something that defied the natural order. Yi Hao knew about it, but no one else had seen it before. At this moment, Guo Jinyu felt like there were 10,000 curses in the depths of his heart. Galloping past, he was a little regretful now. Should he not have made the bet? In the beginning, he still had a glimmer of hope for Yi Hao's pill refinement. Now that he saw this scene, his only hope was completely snuffed out. Although refining pills became much easier with the system around, he still had to use the necessary hand seals. Yi Hao immediately formed a set of hand seals and entered the cauldron. Then, he immediately retracted the fire. The cauldron returned to calm. So many people. After refining the first round of pills, Yi Hao realized that the outside of the sacred cauldron hall was already packed with people. Eldest young Master Yi, how's your pill refinement? I wonder if you can broaden my horizons. Seeing that Yi Hao had finished refining pills, Third Elder Sin asked. In the eyes of Third Elder, everything that Yi Hao had done was complete nonsense. It would be a miracle if he could succeed. Third Elder looked at Guo Jinyu mockingly as he spoke to Yi Hao. Hearing Third Elder's words, Yi Hao instantly understood that he was here to cause trouble again. Since he was here to cause trouble, Yi Hao wasn't going to be polite. Who do you think you are? Third Elder's smile instantly froze when he heard Yi Hao's words. It was as if he had eaten a dead fly. No matter what, he was still Gedanzan's third highest elder. However, he hadn't expected that Yi Hao wouldn't give him any face. Impudent. This is our Gedanzan's third supreme elder. Don't be rude. Huang Yu seized the opportunity and immediately shouted. Why? Are you asking for a beating again? Yi Hao raised his eyebrows and rubbed his palms together. Seeing Yi Hao rubbing his palms, Huang Yu wanted to refute, but his words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. Now that he thought about it, the memory of Yi Hao beating him up was still fresh in his mind. Although his face had already recovered, he could still feel the burning sensation on his face. Yi Hao, how is it? Guo Jinyu asked with concern. At the same time, he was very nervous, not for anything else, but because whether or not Yi Hao could successfully concoct pills would determine whether or not he could keep his position as the sect leader. But looking at the current situation, it was very difficult. However, Guo Jinyu still held a trace of hope in his heart. Humph! Seeing that Yi Hao didn't give him any face, Third Supreme Elder couldn't help but snort coldly. He stood by the side and watched quietly. In any case, Guo Jinyu had already boasted in front of everyone that as long as Yi Hao didn't successfully concoct pills, he would get lost from his position as the sect leader. What's the matter? Hearing Guo Jinyu's question, Yi Hao asked in return. He was a little curious now. Why were there so many people concerned about whether or not he could successfully concoct pills? Guo Jinyu sighed and immediately transmitted his voice to Yi Hao to explain. You guys actually made a bet. Yi Hao was slightly taken aback. He didn't expect that these people would use this as a bet. But seeing Guo Jinyu and Third Supreme Elder's expressions, Yi Hao immediately understood what was going on. These people must have seen his crude and simple pill concoction technique and thought that he didn't know how to concoct pills. Therefore, this Third Supreme Elder thought that he would definitely win. But Guo Jinyu was the opposite. However, Yi Hao also admired Guo Jinyu in his heart. He actually dared to bet on his pill concoction technique after seeing his pill concoction technique. How daring was he? It's over. Seeing Yi Hao's stunned expression, Guo Jinyu's heart instantly sank. Forget it. If I lose, so be it. Guo Jinyu immediately sighed and comforted himself. Thinking of this, Guo Jinyu immediately said, I admit defeat. Hearing Guo Jinyu's words, the disciples and elders were all dumbfounded. They didn't expect Guo Jinyu to admit defeat so easily. As for Third Supreme Elder, when he heard Guo Jinyu's words, he instantly beamed with joy. Wait a minute. Before Guo Jinyu could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Yi Hao. Everyone looked at Yi Hao one after another. Yi Hao smiled and said, "Who said that we lost? Don't tell me you succeeded in concocting pills." Hearing Yi Hao's words, Guo Jinyu's originally desolate heart became lively again. As for Third Supreme Elder, when he heard Yi Hao's words, the smile on his face froze again. He looked at Yi Hao in confusion and then looked at the pill concoction furnace. He realized that there wasn't even the slightest bit of pill fragrance on the pill concoction furnace. This couldn't be any more obvious. The pill concoction had failed. He didn't understand what Yi Hao meant by interrupting at this time. "I heard that you like to bet." Yi Hao looked at Third Supreme Elder. When Third Supreme Elder saw Yi Hao's gaze, he panicked for no reason. Looking at Yi Hao's confident smile, he actually forgot to answer for a moment. "Why don't we raise the stakes?" "What stakes?" Hearing Yi Hao's words, Third Supreme Elder looked at Yi Hao in confusion. He didn't understand what Yi Hao was up to, and Guo Jinyu was also looking at Yi Hao in confusion. He realized that he couldn't see through Yi Hao at all. However, he had already given up. Now, he could only treat this as a last resort. No matter what Yi Hao did, the worst outcome would just be losing his position as sect master. "Let's bet on whether my pill concoction succeeds or not," Yi Hao said as he pointed at the pill concoction furnace that stood quietly in the middle of the hall. "If I win, what will I get?" Third Supreme Elder narrowed his eyes as he pondered in his heart. At the same time, he looked at Yi Hao. "If you win, I'll help you control Gedanzin completely. I'll definitely not find trouble with you." "Are you serious?" Hearing Yi Hao's words, Third Supreme Elder's eyes lit up. He didn't care about the first part of the sentence. What he cared about was the second part. At this moment, Third Supreme Elder could no longer control the excitement in his heart. This was because although he had made a bet with Guo Jinyu previously, he was still worried. He was worried that if Guo Jinyu lost, Yi Hao would find trouble with him. He knew that he wasn't a match for the martial god. However, with Yi Hao's words, he had no scruples. When Guo Jinyu heard Yi Hao's words, he couldn't help but frown deeply. He didn't understand why Yi Hao wanted to make a bet with Third Supreme Elder. Was this a ploy by Yi Hao to scare Third Supreme Elder? Or had Yi Hao really succeeded in concocting the pill? Guo Jinyu couldn't help but look at the pill concoction furnace. He realized that he couldn't see any trace of success. He turned to look at Yi Hao. Similarly, he couldn't tell what Yi Hao was thinking. Chapter 515. What if I lose? The third highest elder was very tempted by Yi Hao's bet, but he still asked cautiously, "I'll cripple your cultivation, destroy your alchemy skills, and make you a slave in Gedanzin for all eternity." Yi Hao said icily with a stern gaze. "What?" Regarding this bet, everyone was speechless for a moment. This was because this bet was simply too overbearing. Although it wouldn't harm the third highest elder's life, his cultivation would be crippled. Regardless of whether it was crippling his cultivation, destroying his alchemy skills, or even making him a slave for all eternity, any one of these options was much more ruthless than killing him. The third highest elder's expression changed again and again when he heard this bet. He was momentarily at a loss for words. The third highest elder stared at Yi Hao, hoping to glean something from Yi Hao's eyes. However, he was destined to be disappointed. Yi Hao's eyes didn't waver at all. Bet or not bet? The third highest elder's heart instantly sank into a dilemma. Although he was very confident about winning this bet, he had a very high chance of winning. However, when he saw Yi Hao's confident expression and the punishment for losing, he didn't dare make a decision for a moment. At this moment, everyone's gaze landed on the third highest elder. They want to know whether the third highest elder dared to bet or not. Are you betting or not? If you aren't, then leave this place. Don't disturb my alchemy. Yi Hao said impatiently when he saw the third highest elder hesitate. I'll bet. The third highest elder gritted his teeth and chose to believe in himself. After all, victory was right in front of him. If he missed this opportunity, who knew when he would get another one? He actually made the bet. The third highest elder was indeed the third highest elder. I knew that the third highest elder would bet. I reckon that the third highest elder would win this bet. It seemed like that kid's bravado didn't scare the third highest elder. Everyone started discussing once again when they heard the third highest elder's words. However, the majority of people were still optimistic about the third highest elder. Many people even looked at Guo Jinyu with pity in their eyes. After all, this bet was related to whether or not Guo Jinyu could protect the sect leader's reputation. There were even quite a few people who looked at Yi Hao with strange gazes. They were all suspecting whether or not Yi Hao was in cahoots with the third highest elder to deliberately set a trap for Guo Jinyu. "Then I'll open the cauldron," Yi Hao said, and was about to open the cauldron. "Wait a moment." Supreme Third Elder suddenly moved to stop him. "What? Are you regretting it?" Yi Hao looked at Third Supreme Elder. How could I possibly regret it? I was just worried and wanted to find someone to personally open it." Supreme Third Elder coldly snorted. He still hadn't let down his guard against Yi Hao. He was also afraid that Yi Hao would do something when he took out the pills. That would be bad. Yi Hao shrugged his shoulders, looking indifferent. "You go, open the pill furnace for me." Supreme Third Elder swept a glance at the crowd before he pointed at Huang Yu and said, "Understood." Seeing that Supreme Third Elder had personally pointed at him, it was obvious that he was going to be taken seriously. Huang Yu immediately became excited. At this moment, everyone's gazes landed on him. Huang Yu straightened his back and strode toward the sacred cauldron hall. Huang Yu glanced at Yi Hao, but didn't dare to look at Yi Hao directly. He sneered as he walked past Yi Hao. "Open." Huang Yu circulated his strength and opened the lid of the cauldron. At this moment, everyone, including Guo Jinyu and the Grand Elders, stretched their necks to see what was inside the cauldron. But when the cauldron was opened, they didn't notice any changes. There wasn't even a trace of medicinal fragrance. It was as if it hadn't been used at all. If not for the fact that everyone saw Yi Hao adding herbs into the cauldron with their own eyes, they would have suspected that Yi Hao didn't refine pills at all. "Ha, looks like I've won." Supreme Third Elder couldn't help but laugh proudly when he saw the cauldron lid open. Sure enough, this kid was bluffing. I knew it from the start. I didn't expect Supreme Third Elder to really win. Then wouldn't the sect leader? At this point, everyone couldn't help but look at Guo Jinyu. After all, Guo Jinyu had been the sect leader for so many years and had led Gedanzin for so many years. They really couldn't get used to it when he was suddenly taken down. At this moment, Guo Jinyu's face turned pale. He didn't expect that he would lose so thoroughly. Guo Jinyu looked at Supreme Third Elder's smug face and suppressed a bellyful of anger. But there was nothing he could do. Guo Jinyu looked at Yi Hao again and realized that he was still expressionless. He could only sigh. What is this?" Huang Yu opened the cauldron and saw two black round objects lying quietly on the surface of the cauldron. They looked like pills, but didn't have the smell of pills. And it looked ordinary, just like black mud. Huang Yu used his own experience to confirm that they weren't pills. Huang Yu wanted to humiliate Yi Hao, so he couldn't help but raise the decibel of his voice. Although the crowd couldn't see the situation inside the cauldron, their curiosity was ignited when they heard Huang Yu's words. As for the Supreme Elders, their hearts tightened, especially Supreme Third Elder. He stared at the cauldron motionlessly. "Let's go and take a look," Supreme Third Elder said and shot toward the cauldron. It wasn't just Supreme Third Elder. The other Supreme Elders and even Guo Jinyu flew over curiously. "What is this? Trash pills?" Trash pills are already praising it. Even if they're trash pills, they still have martial strength or medicinal fragrance. That's good. They're just bullsh asterisk T. Yi Hao, what else do you have to say? Keep your promise. Gedanzin is mine. Get rid of these old things for me. Third Supreme Elder proudly laughed. After laughing, he pointed at the other Supreme Elders and said, "Let's go." Supreme Third Elder, what do you mean? We didn't provoke you. You don't have to be so ruthless. Supreme Third Elder, let's talk nicely. There's no need to be so cruel. The few Grand Elders immediately took a few steps back and angrily pointed at the Third Grand Elder as they spoke. "If you don't want to die, you can choose to rely on me, and you can keep your life." Supreme Third Elder stroked his beard and smiled with satisfaction. The supreme elders instantly looked at each other. They couldn't make a decision at that moment. The supreme elders looked at Yi Hao. They wanted to know if Yi Hao would honor the bet. As alchemists, can't you see that these are two pills? Ha, you call this a pill? Are you crazy? Do you think that just because it's round, it's a pill? Hearing Yi Hao's words, the third supreme elder interrupted without any restraint. Watch carefully. The moment Yi Hao finished speaking, he suddenly held the two pills in his hand. Cracking sounds could be heard. Could it be that he didn't want to lose face and wanted to destroy these two black balls? Everyone had the same question in their hearts. Chapter 516. What is he doing? Why did he destroy the elixir? Could it be that he can't stand it anymore and feels that he is losing face? How can that thing he refined be called an elixir? Even a 3-year-old child's elixir is better than his. Everyone watched as Yi Hao crushed the elixir in his hand, and everyone started discussing. What is that? Why is it so dazzling? Everyone didn't understand what Yi Hao was doing. But at this moment, they suddenly saw a dazzling light burst out from Yi Hao's hand. Everyone consciously covered their eyes with their hands. Rumble. Suddenly, the cloudless sky began to rumble with thunder. 2 balls of light shot out from Yi Hao's hand and flew into the sky. At this moment, everyone could see clearly that the dazzling light was actually 2 elixirs. Elixirs can emit light? Many disciples were puzzled. Only a few elders were deep in thought when they saw this scene. Third Supreme Elder's expression changed again and again. He had a look of disbelief as he stared blankly at the sky. Guo Jinyu was also shocked. He thought in disbelief, how is this possible? At their level, of course, they knew that the elixir that could cause a phenomenon in heaven and earth and undergo a lightning tribulation was at least a sage-level elixir. And sage-level elixirs could only be refined by a sage-level alchemist. And it was difficult to find a sage-level alchemist among hundreds of millions of people. Even Gedanzin only had a sage-level alchemist when it was first established. And since then, there had never been a sage-level alchemist. Otherwise, Gedanzin wouldn't have gradually declined. Even he and the other supreme elders were only emperor-level alchemists. The highest they could refine was an emperor-level elixir, and the failure rate was very high. And they didn't even dare to think about refining a sage-level elixir. Not only was it a waste of resources, but it was also because even if they refined it 100 or 1,000 times, it was very difficult to succeed once. And they couldn't easily take out the resources to refine it 100 or 1,000 times. And such a young man that they looked down on actually refined a sage-level elixir. How could they not be shocked? One must know how old Yi Hao was. He was already very powerful in terms of martial arts. And now he was so powerful in terms of alchemy. How could they survive? Meanwhile, some of the elders were still feeling ashamed of what they had said about Yi Hao. This was a blatant slap to the face. Previously, he had even said that Lin Fan did not know how to concoct pills, and that the things he concocted were **T. However, the things that Lin Fan concocted were saint pills. They were the ones who had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Seeing the strange phenomenon caused by the divine elixir, the crowd watched quietly. As alchemists, they could die without regrets after witnessing the divine elixir tribulation. How is this possible? I'm not dreaming, am I? As a genius disciple, Huang Yu was naturally aware of what was happening in front of him. However, he would never have thought that this pill was concocted by Yi Hao, who was about the same age as him. Thinking back to how he had insisted on competing with Yi Hao earlier, he even had the thought of killing himself. Her alchemy skills couldn't even compare to Yi Hao's. Only now did Huang Yu know why Yi Hao couldn't be bothered to compete with her. It was because they weren't on the same level. Now that she thought about it, Huang Yu realized how ridiculous and arrogant she had been. This isn't real. This isn't real. At this moment, the third highest elder couldn't keep his composure anymore as he screamed in his heart. He couldn't accept that a young man who didn't even know how to refine elixirs could be concocted. But now, Yi Hao had refined a sage-level elixir. The difference was simply too great. He couldn't accept it. That was a sage-level elixir. He probably wouldn't be able to refine it in his entire life, but Yi Hao had done it. Most importantly, thinking back, Yi Hao had refined the two sage level elixirs so casually. It was like a child's doodle. The third highest elder realized that he hadn't seen Yi Hao clearly from the beginning. To be able to refine a sage level elixir so casually, Yi Hao was definitely not an ordinary person. He was definitely an existence that he couldn't reach. If this happened to someone older than him, the third highest elder could still barely accept it. But Yi Hao was just a young man. How could he accept it? Third highest elder, it seems like you're going to lose. Seeing this scene, Guojinyu's heart was in turmoil. He was extremely shocked, but at the same time, he heaved a sigh of relief. At the very least, he had kept his position as the sect master. At the same time, he had gotten rid of his greatest enemy in Gedanzin, the third highest elder. Guojinyu's tone was a little smug as he looked at the third highest elder. The third highest elder's face was pale. Looking at the lightning tribulation that was still condensing in the sky, he snorted coldly. The elixir can only be considered a true sage-level elixir after the lightning tribulation. It's still too early to say. Guojinyu frowned. He didn't expect the third highest elder to be so shameless. Indeed, refining a sage-level elixir was only the first step. The most important step was to go through the lightning tribulation. If it passed, it would become a true sage-level elixir. If it failed, it would turn into nothingness. You must succeed. Guojinyu couldn't help but pray in his heart as he looked at the mighty thunderclouds in the sky. After all, he wasn't sure if the quality of Yi Hao's sage-level elixir would be able to pass through this powerful lightning tribulation. Kacha! Suddenly, there was a loud bang in the sky. A purple lightning bolt struck the two sage elixir pills. Everyone wanted to open their eyes wide to see this scene with their own eyes. However, the light was too dazzling, so they could only close their eyes. When the thunder disappeared, everyone couldn't wait to look at the two sage elixir pills. It's a success! Guojinyu shouted excitedly when he saw the two perfect sage elixir pills. Everyone also looked at the two sage elixir pills excitedly. After all, being able to see two sage elixir pills successfully pass the tribulation with their own eyes was enough for them to show off. Rumble! However, before everyone could talk about it, the thunderclouds in the sky rumbled again. What's going on? Isn't the tribulation over? Everyone looked at Guojinyu in confusion. This sage elixir pill is too heaven-defying. It's beyond ordinary sage elixir pills. Even the heavens don't want to see it formed. The shocked First Supreme Elder suppressed the shock in his heart and said slowly, "Haha, as long as the sage elixir pills don't succeed, I will still be the winner. Lightning tribulation. Quickly destroy these two sage elixir pills." Although the Third Supreme Elder saw Yi Hao's sage elixir pills, he still felt very uncomfortable in his heart. However, he could only force a smile and pray that the lightning tribulation would quickly destroy the two sage elixir pills. At this moment, everyone felt uncomfortable when they heard the Third Supreme Elder's words. All of them frowned. Even those who wanted to rely on the Third Supreme Elder had the same reaction at this moment. As alchemists, they admired powerful alchemists. Yi Hao was able to refine sage elixir pills at such a young age. Naturally, he had won their respect. Chapter 517. Why is there another lightning tribulation? Although Yi Hao knew that the divine elixir would trigger a lightning tribulation, he did not expect that there would be another one after the first one. However, Yi Hao was relieved when he thought about the effects of the peak martial sage elixir. Luckily, the lightning tribulation only lasted for 2 rounds, and the 2 peak martial sage elixirs were perfectly preserved. Yi Hao looked at the peak martial sage elixir and realized that it was even brighter than before. Yo, I didn't expect this ancient alchemy sect to be different. When they saw us coming, they directly sent us a greeting gift. It seems that Gedanzin is really secretive. They even have a sage alchemist. It seems that the whole continent has been fooled by Gedanzin. He is not desolate at all. But so what? Didn't we still find out? Yi Hao looked at the sky and immediately kept the elixir. It's a young boy. Interesting. When Yi Hao kept the elixir, it naturally attracted the attention of Mu Shengzhen and the other two patriarchs. Boy, be smart. Kneel on the ground and give us the divine elixir with both hands. The second patriarch looked at Yi Hao as if he was looking at an ant. Who do you think you are? Yi Hao did not hold back and retorted. You are courting death. After being scolded by Yi Hao, the second patriarch was stunned. Then, he threw a palm strike at Yi Hao. This palm strike was powerful. If it landed, Yi Hao would definitely be smashed into meat paste. Even the entire sacred cauldron hall would be affected. Newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. The first patriarch shook his head and laughed. He had no intention of stopping the second patriarch from attacking. Guo Jinyu's face changed, and he immediately spoke up. After all, Yi Hao is such a young genius alchemist. He cannot let him die here. Who are you? This is Gedanzin. Don't be presumptuous, Guo Jinyu shouted and tried to stop the second patriarch. Today, we will teach Gedanzin a lesson. Today, Gedanzin will die, the fifth old ancestor said arrogantly. Guo Jinyu looked at the attire of the four patriarchs, and his face turned ashen. Are you all from Mu Shengzhen? At least you have a discerning eye. You killed my third brother. This enmity is unforgivable. The fourth old ancestor exuded a murderous aura. When the disciples of Gedanzin sensed the killing intent emanating from the fourth old ancestor, they felt their bodies and hearts tremble violently. The reason was none other than the fact that the four martial god realm progenitors were too outstanding. I'll give you a chance to live. Tell me who refined the holy pill. The great ancestor asked in a deep voice. It's that brat. Third Supreme Elder immediately stood out and pointed at Yi Hao. What do you mean by him? Second brother, stop. Seeing that the third highest elder was pointing at Yi Hao, he hurriedly made a move to break the second ancestor's attack. Big brother? The second ancestor's attack was interrupted. He looked at the great ancestor unhappily. Second brother, a holy pill alchemist is rare. Why don't we use him to develop Mu Shengzhen? The great ancestor immediately said, Big brother is right. The second ancestor pondered for a moment before glaring at Yi Hao angrily. Although he was displeased when Yi Hao talked back to him, he was still reasonable and knew how precious a holy pill alchemist was. You did well. Who are you? The great ancestor looked at the third supreme elder. The third supreme elder immediately replied, I'm Gedanzin's third supreme elder. Greetings, sirs. I have nothing to do with this group of people. They were the ones who killed your Mu Shengzhen's men. The third supreme elder immediately disassociated himself from the matter. Traitor! Trash! I didn't expect him to be such a treacherous person. I've misjudged him. This time, everyone saw the third supreme elder's true colors and started cursing him softly. The third supreme elder glared at Yi Hao angrily before turning to the four ancestors. Sirs, which martial god among you was killed by this kid? That martial god died a terrible death. What? The four ancestors were enraged when they heard the third supreme elder's description. This time, their auras were exposed as expected. The first one to be suppressed was the third supreme elder. He could only shout with difficulty, Sirs, I can't take it anymore. Everyone withdrew their auras when they saw the third supreme elder's wretched state. However, they still glared at Yi Hao with murderous intent. You killed our third brother. You deserve to die 1,000 times over. But now we'll give you a chance. Either you die, or you serve us. The Grand Ancestor looked at Yi Hao and said in a cold voice, Based on the relationship between you two brothers, it doesn't seem like much. I thought you would kill me immediately. Yi Hao chuckled. The four ancestors were enraged when they heard Yi Hao's mocking words. Do you really have a death wish? We can fulfill your wish. If you want me to leave with you, kill him. Yi Hao suddenly said as he pointed at the third supreme elder. The third supreme elder narrowed his eyes when he saw Yi Hao pointing at him. When he sensed the gazes of the four ancestors on him, he started to panic. The third supreme elder retreated as he said, Sirs, I can also refine pills. Furthermore, I have never harmed anyone from Mu Shengzhen. You can't kill me. I will be loyal and devoted to you. Do you know how to refine sacred pills? The great ancestor asked. The third supreme elder's face stiffened. He shook his head bitterly and immediately tried to explain. In that case, you can only die. Before he could finish speaking, he saw the great ancestor appear in front of him in a flash. Since you have performed well, I will leave you with an intact corpse. The great ancestor said slowly as he choked the third supreme elder. The third supreme elder struggled desperately, but it was to no avail. He gradually found it difficult to breathe until he lost all signs of life. When everyone saw the state the third supreme elder was in, not a single one of them felt pity for him. Instead, they felt extremely pained. The reason for that was because the utmost supreme third elder had actually betrayed all of them at the crucial moment in order to struggle at death's door. All right, I can go with you. However, you cannot harm anyone here. Otherwise, I will absolutely not refine medicinal pills for you. Seeing the death of the third supreme elder, Yi Hao's emotions did not fluctuate as he continued. The ancestors felt even more displeased when they saw that Yi Hao still had other demands. The great ancestor said, "Do you think you have what it takes to negotiate?" Yi Hao shrugged his shoulders and ignored him. The great ancestor clenched his fists tightly and gnashed his teeth at Yi Hao. "You better behave yourself. Otherwise, I will let you know that death is a luxury. Then let's go." After Yi Hao finished speaking, he actually flew out first. Chapter 518. Yi Hao gave Wu Jinyu a reassuring look. He did not transmit his voice because he was afraid that the four patriarchs would sense it. "Let's go." The patriarchs looked at Yi Hao's back and immediately chased after him. This was because compared to destroying the ancient alchemy sect, a sage-level alchemist was much more valuable. "Why? Are you not going?" After flying for a while, the first patriarch looked at Yi Hao, who had stopped, and asked in confusion, "One of you seems to be missing." Yi Hao looked at the three patriarchs and asked with a smile, "Huh, isn't it too late for you to realize it now?" The fourth patriarch laughed proudly. "It's okay." Yi Hao shrugged and asked, "What do you think of this place?" The three patriarchs frowned. They did not understand Yi Hao's meaning. But the first patriarch still said, "The scenery is beautiful. It's a good place." "That's good," Yi Hao said with a smile. "What do you mean? Do it." Yi Hao ignored the first patriarch's question and said coldly, "Roar." Suddenly, the roar of a leopard was heard. The three patriarchs looked over and saw a black shadow that was hundreds of meters long pouncing on them. Its movements were as fast as lightning. The first patriarch saw this and sneered. "So, it's a little leopard. Old 5, let's play with him." "Okay." The fifth patriarch immediately agreed. He raised a 10-meter-long saber and faced the leopard head-on. "Is this what you're capable of? You overestimate yourself." The first patriarch sneered at Yi Hao. "Is that so?" Yi Hao pointed behind the first patriarch. "Then look behind you. Old 4. The first patriarch was afraid that Yi Hao would run away. He stared at Yi Hao and shouted at the fourth patriarch at the same time. The fourth patriarch immediately looked behind him. Big brother, what's wrong?" Hearing the fourth patriarch's trembling voice, the first patriarch immediately turned around in confusion. Then, his expression changed. Lions that were hundreds of meters long, foxes that were hundreds of meters long, gorillas that were hundreds of meters long, elephants that were thousands of meters long. All kinds of giant ancient beasts stood in a row, looking at them. Even though he was a martial god realm expert, he could not help but feel his scalp turning numb upon seeing this. The great old ancestor and the fourth old ancestor looked at each other. The great old ancestor immediately shouted, "Capture that brat." He had no idea where he would get so many powerful demonic beasts in the future. Furthermore, they were able to tell with a single glance that those demonic beasts were all peak martial saints. They didn't dare to resist. Therefore, the most important thing now was to capture Yi Hao. As long as he captured Yi Hao, these demonic beasts would collapse on their own. But when they turned around and looked at Yi Hao, they were shocked again. This was because Yi Hao was sitting on the heavenly dragon throne, and there were 3 people standing beside him. They were Zhuge Liang, Little One, and Gui Yifan. All 3 of them were martial gods. Xiao Yi's cultivation was the lowest, a first-order martial god. Zhuge Liang was a third-order martial god, and Gui Yifan was a fourth-order martial god. 3 martial gods. 3 against 2. How were they supposed to fight? Run! The great old ancestor and the fourth old ancestor looked at each other and thought at the same time. They wanted to escape in 2 different directions. Roar, roar, hiss. However, it was too late for them to escape now. Many ancient demonic beasts had blocked their escape route. Kill these beasts! The great old ancestor snorted when he saw that their escape route was blocked. Old 5, stop playing. Finish them quickly and come help us. The fourth old ancestor shouted at the fifth old ancestor who was fighting with the Black Panther. The fifth old ancestor felt bitter. He wasn't in the mood to play. He didn't know why, but he felt that this Black Panther was much more powerful than an ordinary peak martial saint demonic beast. He knew that he had killed a peak martial saint demonic beast before. However, it had never been so difficult. But this Black Panther had brought him endless torture. Big brother, fourth brother, this demonic beast is very strange. It's stronger than ordinary demonic beasts. The fifth old ancestor said bitterly. In fact, the great old ancestor and the fourth old ancestor already knew how powerful the ancient demonic beasts were. Moreover, each of them had to fight against 5 or 6 ancient demonic beasts. Their disadvantage was revealed in an instant. Poochie, cough, cough. Big brother is too abnormal. The second order martial god realm fourth old ancestor was the first to succumb to the attacks of 6 ancient demonic beasts. The fox's claw landed on the fourth old ancestor's chest, and he was sent flying. Fourth brother. Seeing the fourth old ancestor flying, the great old ancestor panicked and looked over worriedly. Plop! The ancient python took the opportunity to whip the great old ancestor with its tail. The great old ancestor couldn't withstand the attack and fell to the ground. Big brother, fourth brother. The fifth old ancestor looked at the great old ancestor and shouted angrily. Fifth brother, you are not their match. Quickly run. The great old ancestor shouted anxiously. Want to run? Gui Yifan sneered. In a flicker, he shot toward the fifth old ancestor. Looking at Gui Yifan, who was like an arrow leaving the bow, the fifth old ancestor didn't have time to think. He tried his best to escape. Do you think you can run away? Suddenly, the fifth old ancestor heard a mocking voice. The fifth old ancestor's face changed. Without hesitation, he slashed at Gui Yifan with a huge saber in his hand. Rumble! The huge saber caused the air to shatter. The momentum was terrifying. At this moment, the sky seemed to be moved by the saber. In an instant, dark clouds gathered and the air seemed to be frozen. Too weak, the fifth old ancestor thought that he could defeat Gui Yifan with all his strength. However, he heard Gui Yifan's disdainful voice behind him. The fifth old ancestor's face changed. He didn't expect Gui Yifan to be so strong. He was much stronger than him. Sensing the dangerous aura behind him, the fifth old ancestor tried his best to escape. At the same time, he threw the huge saber in his hand behind him. Boom! The fifth old ancestor, who was running away, suddenly felt a huge impact on his back. Then he felt a sharp pain. The fifth old ancestor gritted his teeth. He ignored his injury and tried to escape. Boom! However, before he could fly out for even a second, his waist was once again hit by a violent impact. Humph, you can take a beating. Gui Yifan sneered. He was toying with the fifth old ancestor like a mouse. I advise you to let my fifth brother go. Do you know that the entire Gedanzin is in my hands now? The first old ancestor warned Yihao angrily when he saw the fifth old ancestor being beaten up miserably. From the beginning, he didn't intend to let Gedanzin go. Therefore, he had asked the second old ancestor to go back on his word to Gedanzin. He wanted to control all the people in Gedanzin. He wanted to ask Yi how to refine elixirs for him. You're courting death. Yihao's face changed suddenly. His voice became gloomy. Chapter 519. Seeing Yi Hao's angry expression, the first great ancestor and the fourth great ancestor were in a good mood. They looked at Yi Hao proudly. It was as if being able to see Yi Hao's anger was the greatest satisfaction they could get. Kid, it's not too late to beg for mercy now. As long as you kneel before us, we might spare Gedanzen's life, the first great ancestor said proudly. Kid, kneel down now. My big brother has a bad temper. If anything happens to Gedanzen, it won't be good. The fourth great ancestor laughed arrogantly. Ha, what are you laughing at? The first great ancestor thought that he had Yi Hao under control. But when he saw the anger on Yi Hao's face suddenly disappear, he laughed mockingly. The first great ancestor's heart skipped a beat. He frowned and looked at Yi Hao in a deep voice. He did not understand how Yi Hao could still laugh at a time like this. From his point of view, Yi Hao and Gedanzen were very close. It was impossible for him to leave Gedanzen alone. Aren't you afraid that I will really destroy Gedanzen? Although he did not understand why Yi Hao was laughing, the first great ancestor threatened him again. Look, who is that? Yi Hao suddenly pointed behind the first great ancestor and said. The first great ancestor and the fourth great ancestor turned around suspiciously and shouted, Second brother! Second brother! That's right. The second great ancestor was like a pile of rotten meat being held in the hands of two ancient beasts. The first great ancestor and the fourth great ancestor's faces turned pale. Their only bargaining chip was gone. What they did not expect was that Yi Hao had already arranged people to guard against the second great ancestor. What else do you want to threaten me with? Continue. Yi Hao sat on the heavenly dragon throne and glanced at the first great ancestor. The first great ancestor was furious. He wanted to refute Yi Hao, but he did not know where to start. If you want to kill me or torture me, do as you please. Hurry up and do it. The fifth old ancestor was also caught at this time and shouted unwillingly, All right, I'll grant you your wish. It's just a pity that you've wasted thousands of years of cultivation, Yi Hao said regretfully. Eat them. Following Yi Hao's order, the ancient beasts opened their bloody mouths and devoured a martial god realm expert. The benefits to them would be enormous. Thus, they were impatient to devour the four old ancestors. The faces of the old ancestors turned ghastly pale as they watched the numerous ancient beasts open their gaping mouths, because they had thought that they might die. However, they had never thought that they would be eaten by an ancient beast and turn into a pile of dung. Stop, stop! Just as the beast's mouth was about to touch the grand ancestor, the grand ancestor suddenly shouted, What? Do you have something else? Yi Hao raised his eyebrows and asked with a smile. What will it take for you to let us go? Even though the grand ancestor did not want to beg for mercy, he could not care less about his reputation in the face of death. He did not notice that the grins on Yi Hao and Zhuge Liang's faces grew wider. According to Yi Hao's personality, he would kill anyone who offended him without mercy. However, he was in dire need of manpower now. Besides, killing a few old ancestors was only temporary. Instead, it would be more useful to take these few people under his command. However, it did not mean that Yi Hao would let them go so easily. At the very least, he had to suppress the pride of the old ancestors. Are you begging for mercy? You don't seem to be sincere enough. Yi Hao squinted at the grand ancestor, who had an unwilling expression on his face. The grand ancestor's expression changed, but he had no choice but to lower his head. The lives of his brothers were currently in Yi Hao's hands. It was his last resort. He had no choice but to lower his attitude. Senior, how can you let us go? It's very simple if you want to live. Take this pill or swear allegiance to me, and I will spare your lives. Yi Hao took out the mind-controlling pill and said, What pill is this? The fourth old ancestor asked cautiously. However, Yi Hao did not answer at all. He just closed his eyes slightly, as if he had fallen into a deep sleep. The silence was frightening. Big brother, what should we do? The fourth old ancestor asked the grand ancestor. The grand ancestor smiled bitterly. Do we have a choice? The fourth old ancestor also smiled bitterly when he heard the grand ancestor's words. Indeed, there were a few giant mouths hanging over their heads now. If they did not swear or take the pill, it would be impossible for them to live. We'll take the pill. The Grand Ancestor made up his mind, because in his opinion, even death was better than swearing an oath. Swearing meant that they would have to be loyal to Yi Hao forever. Moreover, it would affect their talent in their next life. Obviously, he did not want to do that. In their opinion, the mind-controlling pill in Yi Hao's hand was just a poison. Yi Hao wanted to use the poison to control them. However, it would definitely not harm their lives. Otherwise, Yi Hao would not have to go through so much trouble. Moreover, if they took the pill, they might even be able to obtain the antidote in the future and escape from Yi Hao's control. When the time came, they would work hard to cultivate and seek revenge on Yi Hao. The Grand Ancestor thought insidiously, but he was just imagining the best. He definitely could not imagine that there would be such a heaven-defying pill like the mind-controlling pill. All right, we'll take the pill. The Grand Ancestor made up his mind and said, "Congratulations. You've made the right decision." Yi Hao opened his eyes again, took out 4 pills, and threw them to the 4 old ancestors. The 4 old ancestors were reluctant, but they had no choice but to take the mind-controlling pill under Yi Hao's gaze. Kneel down. Yi Hao immediately used the mind-controlling pill to control the 4 old ancestors. The 4 old ancestors did not have to react. They actually knelt down at Yi Hao's feet in unison. Ding dong. Congratulations on leveling up. Current level, 7th level Martial Emperor. At this moment, a notification sounded in Yi Hao's mind again. It was because he had subdued the 4 old ancestors that he was able to level up. One had to know that he was previously a 4th level Martial Emperor. After subduing all the ancient beasts, he broke through 2 levels to reach the 6th level Martial Emperor. Sensing the change in Yi Hao's aura, the 4 old ancestors were shocked. They did not understand why Yi Hao's cultivation could level up for no reason. Could he not be so infuriating? Let's go. We'll go back to Gdanzin. Yi Hao immediately kept the Heavenly Dragon throne. The second round of the Myriad Kingdom ceremony was about to begin. He had only refined 2 peak martial sage elixirs. He needed to refine more elixirs now. The moment Yi Hao returned to Gdanzin, a large group of people immediately surrounded him. Seeing that Yi Hao was safe and sound, the Grand Elder immediately led the disciples and bowed to Yi Hao. "Thank you, young Master Yi Hao, for saving our lives." They were completely moved by Yi Hao. Yi Hao had purposely lured the 4 old ancestors away for their safety. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.